The Tales of Transformation season has kicked off, but some things never change. If you're looking for the first LATAM champion of the new season, look no further than to LNDsRargef. If you see Inadequance enter a tournament with his trusty Giratina, be very afraid. And if I make a grand finals, well, we'll get into that. Another thing that remains unchanged, you're still listening to the Show 6 podcast, where Speedy is Chief 2 and I, Zzweilous, break down the official championship series for Pokémon GO. So once again, it's time to lock in. Good luck and have fun. Welcome in. Welcome, Speedy. I'm glad you're here again. We just met in Pittsburgh the other day. We did have some time to hang out doing a segment which was called the Pexpert segment. So not only some PvP action, but also a little mini game that we played during the show or ahead of the show. The clip was played during the show. And yeah, we had to pick up a cotton ball with our nose, move it from A to B, and then we had to answer questions on the new Peck receivers, like the buffed Peck Pokemon in the Tales of Transformation season. And I will have to say, I did learn something that weekend, and it was the Xatu moveset, because I did not know that previously.
It was hilarious because we're supposed to be the experts. And then I ask you about Xatu, and you list off a couple of the charge attacks. And I wanted 3 charge attacks because it's too easy to just say 2. So I asked for 3, and then you suggested one. I said no. And then I actually offered the wrong answer as the correct moveset, which turned out to be totally false. If you're watching this and you watch the stream, we totally did it for content. We want to chat to Rage, and it was just rage bait, all right, for all of our trainers.
This is the double legacy Show 6 podcast Xatu that runs the Nightshade Sky Attack moveset, none of which it actually learns in game. It learns Ominous Wind, but
I will say, so it was you, Mish, and Anna that were in the skit. I will say, Anna is like an encyclopedia. She's incredible because we finished the skit and she asked you two, which Pokemon did Will ask you about? And you both told her, and she knew all the movesets. She knew exactly what Xatu learned. She knew exactly what Togekiss learned, named all of the different charge attacks. I was like, my goodness. I thought we were the experts, but Anna's the expert here.
Anna's incredible. I'm glad she had such a successful return to the competitive circuit as well.
Me too. She was incredible. She was stunning. And we have a lot to cover in this podcast. So we're going to talk about Frankfurt, Monterrey, and also Pittsburgh. So we kind of gave you some little sneak peeks of Pittsburgh, but it's going to be a little while before we come back to it. One last thing I'll say is that ZZ, I finally got the chance to interview you in Pittsburgh. That was so much fun as well. I felt like, it was very poetic, and we got some awesome screen grabs that were sent to me by a friend. So thank you again for that. That was great. ZZ, we're going to kick off things with Frankfurt, and you and I went back and forth. We weren't sure if we should make this 2 episodes or 1. We're going to do just 1 colossal episode and try to get everything we possibly can into it. But there's so much to talk about, and I think that we would be remiss not to just open up with talking about the meta and then going into the actual players. So going to Frankfurt, this was a tournament that you competed in as well. Did you feel as panicked and as uncertain as some of the other trainers? Because, I mean, heck, it's the first meta of the season. There's so many question marks.
So I was really annoyed with myself about Frankfurt, actually. And the reason for that was that I tried a little bit of a different approach. So because it was the very first tournament of the season, I decided that I just wanted to bring Pokemon that felt really safe and reliable so I could get points on the board. Like, I trusted in my play. Over the summer, I was like in a little bit of a slump. I couldn't really get anything to work in the Go Battle League. So like some self-doubt always creeps in. But with the start of the new season, I had really, really good results. Not necessarily in practice, but at least in GBL, and I felt more confident. So my idea was, okay, you just bring what's safe and what supposedly works. But yeah, what I ended up doing was that I brought the exact type of meta that the people had the meta read ready for. So while I did manage to make day two, I didn't technically top cut because I did fizzle out at title 13th.
Mm,
And because it was a 107-person tournament, the official top cut, like once you exit your group, is only 8 people. So it
mhm.
was like not a catastrophe, but a slight disappointment. And I think that is due to my very uncharacteristic lack of risk taking that I engaged in for that tournament. And I think other trainers took a lot more risks. And as it tends to be the case in Europe, that gets rewarded.
Yeah, if a typical Zzweilous team is a spicy meatball, this was like a scoop of vanilla ice cream in my mind. We had ZZ's team with the Shadow Cantamarowak, Azumarill, Chargebug, which is probably the most spice on the team, Galarian Moltres, Shadow, Scizor, and Galarian Corsola. So I agree with you. I mean, this has all the same facets that we saw at the end of the season last season, and then maybe some, one slight core breaker in the Chargebug. There's so many interesting overall meta trends for this tournament as well that appeared here, but then kind of faded as we got closer to Pittsburgh. And I think a lot of this is, trainers have had a week to review the results, have had time to think about things. But yeah, I was surprised a bit at the number of fairy types in the team compositions here. Inadequance with Wigglytuff as well as Potoman. Then you had Alfie finishing second with Togekiss. We had a fair number of Azumarill, and then King OWT fifth overall with Tinkaton. So we had basically every fairy present except Dedenne skipped class, which I'm sure everyone in Frankfurt was happy about.
Yeah, very much so. And I think like most, if not all of these fairies do have merit. Um, Obviously, like Togekiss was a little bit of like it felt like almost an outlier because it was very much hyped up initially after we found out that Aura Sphere is only 40 energy now, which is just a fantastic attack that Togekiss gets access to. Then it was briefly ranked within the PvPoke top 10 even. And a lot of people brought it to practice, lost with it in practice, and then dropped it. Alfie stuck with it and made it work,
Yeah.
piloted it all the way to the grand finals. Then there's a bunch of Tinkaton, which I think, like Tinkaton, I personally consider a little bit of a fraud, but it's a fraud that I can understand. I think it's fraudulent because Bulldoze is just a very, very weak move.
Yeah.
So like its coverage is kind of underwhelming. But because of that steel subtyping, it just does some things defensively that no other fairy type really does in that way.
Mhm.
But the standout performer on that front for me was actually the Wigglytuff, which ended up winning the event. It placed third. It came in fifth. Um, Wigglytuff really was a standout performer. And I must say, I think I mentioned it on our preview episode where we discussed the meta options, that I think Wigglytuff is no longer just an RPS GBL you pair it with your Bastiodon Pokemon, but actually a flexible threat that can play really, really well into the meta. And because it has that normal subtyping, it is an excellent answer to the Galarian Corsola that even Upper Shield
Mm.
cannot beat Wigglytuff. So in that role, it really countered one of the standout Pokemon that we have in the meta really, really, really well. And yeah, it's taking the initial gold medal. It was no surprise. If you think about all the Galarian Corsola that were brought.
I really love that you closed with that point because that's exactly what I think. When you see a Pokemon like Wigglytuff that's normal and fairy, not only does it have great offensive targets when you're expecting at least one dark type on every single team, but defensively, finding a way to slow down the Galarian Corsola or the Dusclops, I think is absolutely key. I was kind of comparing this meta in my mind to Worlds because a lot of trainers are coming into the season saying, "Oh well, in the Candle Cult, we're seeing a lot of unique species, we're seeing a lot of different Pokemon win." But it feels like the big three, the Galarian Corsola, the Shadow Cantamarowak, and the Cradilly, like we talked about in our season preview episode, were still just as strong as ever. And not a lot of things looked like they were changing that much, besides the fact that Golisopod was on the downturn. One Pokemon that we didn't really talk about, and I haven't prepped any notes on this, so I'm curious to hear what you think. One Pokemon that was so strong at Worlds, became a world champion, was on both Potaman and Beelzebub's team, was Lapras. And we mentioned Wigglytuff, we mentioned a couple other fairy types, but why in the heck did Lapras absolutely fall off? I mean, I only see it one time in this graphic on RGR's team within the top 16, but that Pokemon was like ubiquitous at the end of last season. Is there like a strong explanation for that?
I wonder what that has to do with Credilli going from a Pokemon that is common to a Pokemon that is essentially mandatory.
Yeah.
I wonder whether it's an overcorrection to some of the new things that have become popular in the very first week. So in GPL, we saw like the aforementioned Togekiss that now has fighting coverage. We saw Empoleon, which was essentially MIA in Frankfurt, but it's just a thing that
Fraud.
people were running a lot.
Fraud.
Maybe, potentially. Then like a lot of Shadow Scizor. We had Dark types that you mentioned already, with a lot of Galarian Moltres running around, where you have double
Mhm.
resisted Psywaves into it. It just felt as if the Pokemon that most players were interested in that moment were pretty hostile to Lapras, and also the switch that already happened during the World Championships, where people dropped the previously popular Dusclops, which is a fantastic matchup for Lapras, especially if you have that Psywave breakpoint,
Mhm.
um, in favor of the Galarian Corsola, which is a neutral enough matchup, but one where you don't do as much Psywave damage and where you take super effective from Power Gems. Yeah, all of that makes Lapras a little less free. I think it's still actually viable and maybe a little
Mhm.
underexplored. But yeah, in Frankfurt at least, we only saw RGR, who is a Swedish trainer who I think had their breakout last year at NEIC of all places,
Mhm.
and also won a pretty high profile practice tournament in the lead up to Frankfurt. And yeah, they finished ninth overall with the singular Lapras in day two in Frankfurt.
So my opinion is similar, but I feel like there's an undercurrent, no pun intended. There's an undercurrent of another reason why Lapras has kind of fallen out of favor, and I think it's due to the rise of electric types. Because previously you had a lot of rock and grass type coverage. You had the Cradilly with, of course, both. You had the Power Gem on something like the Galarian Corsola. But now you have an additional threat to Lapras and opposing water types being the Charjabug, the Lantern, Thunderfang Steelix as well. Unova Stunfisk has been rising. And I know some of those matchups are competitive for Lapras, but up energy, it's pretty disastrous for the Pokemon no matter which way you cut it. So it again, it almost feels like when you look at a overall meta, you look for targets, and maybe an advantageous Pokemon that has a lot of targets is something like Wigglytuff, where you know what you're going to see. You're going to see Corsa, you're going to see a Dark type, you might even see a fighter. So Wigglytuff has targets. It feels like Lapras just has too many threats or too many obstacles in the current meta. And I do agree with your early point that you made that it might be an overcorrection of sorts, because water has always been an incredibly strong facet of competitive Pokemon Go. But as you look at the overall teams, it feels like the water ground role has kind of consolidated itself squarely into the Gastrodon, which I'm sure we'll spend a lot of time talking about. I wanted to mention a couple spice picks because EU always brings the spice. I absolutely adore that about your region, and I am low key jealous at times. Inadequance with Giratina altered, Shadow form, of course. Alfie in second place with the Shadow Charizard. As you scroll down the list, you see some pretty interesting picks, like Lantern on Emmy Weedle's team. We were talking about picks for this meta, and you said Lantern was the least cope of my picks. And Emmy Weedle, I appreciate you, champ, for proving me right. RGR with
I said
Pangoro.
that, and then I built a week into Lantern and lost to Weedle on stream. So that was very
Oh
smart of me.
God. Oh
Uh,
God. You know, sometimes yeah, it's easier to give advice than to take it. I definitely experienced that in my own life. Pangoro on RGR's team, Shadow Torterra on 19 Lawrence. We also had Shadow Dragonair on Stone Collection, which I love to see. He's always been a Dragon Master. Bats with Meowscarada, which I don't think will be topped anytime soon. And I don't know. Other than that, Dunsparce on Alfie's team as well. Maybe Alfie had a an inkling of an idea that a normal type event was coming. Who knows? Who knows?
oh yeah, now we can actually catch, like we can catch Dunsparce and then evolve it to the Dunsparce, which is Dunsparce but longer. So that is very exciting. I think it learns just about the exact same moves. It has a little less, like the stat product is a little lower. It's still on the bulkier side, but it's not as tanky as the regular Dunsparce. So I don't
The
know. It does power up to the Ultra League level, so you could, if you always wanted to Dunsparce in Ultra League, now you can do that.
I think the difference in rankings is like Dunsparce is ranked 56 overall in PvPoke, and the Dunsparce is ranked 256. So quite a gap, almost a chasm between those two Pokemon. In terms of the stream for Frankfurt, I mean, there's always a lot of excitement. It was the same weekend as the Monterrey stream, but of course, or excuse me, the Monterrey tournament, but we did not get a Monterrey stream. So all eyes were on Frankfurt. I just wanted to compliment the casting pairs that were chosen for the event. They were so good. I'm a huge fan of Lou, always been a fan of Lou, and I think that she is the most complete host that we have probably in the entire Pokemon casting team across all games. And she also is just showing her flexibility and adaptability, being able to translate all of her talents over to Go. I thought that's always been very impressive. We had I'm blanking. We had Farid and we also had Leo. Incredible pair. They definitely brought the hype. But then we had a newcomer to the tournament circuit, and I just thought maybe you could weigh in on this person. I don't know if you're friends, foes, or even closer than
Yeah,
that.
I have to say I am probably the number one Junkers fan. Not only is he a very famous YouTuber, he's also my brother and one of my early inspirations for getting into PvP and getting good at PvP, because he was actually the one who kind of got me into the game a little more back in the day, because I had no idea that something competitive for Pokemon Go was coming. I was just like
Yeah,
casually catching, like occasionally opening my game. But yeah, like I was always somebody who had like this competitive streak, and that really turned me from a casual into a tryhard. So yeah, I have to credit a lot of what happened to me over the last couple of years to my little brother, and I was super proud of him for his very first cast. I think he did a fantastic job. I know he's been talking in English for his videos a lot, but it's something
yeah.
different if you do it in your second language off the cuff in a live situation. And he was so quick on his feet, like mentally with his game knowledge, and I think he just really did a fantastic job. Yeah, all the feedback that I've heard on that tournament, on that cast, has also been really, really positive. So I really hope he gets invited again. Obviously, I'm biased, but I do believe he deserves more chances behind the casting desk.
I'll tell you the kryptonite for content creators switching over to commentating as a pair, as a duo, is the risk of monologuing, of just going on for too long, because you're used to doing that with all the content that you create. No one else is filling the air, so you really have to kind of keep on speaking. And I didn't pick up on Jonkus doing that a single time. He was very good. He was willing to give it over to his co-caster, and I thought it was so clever. I was actually just messaging Amanda about this. I felt it was so clever to pair Lou, the most well-equipped host and professional over in EU, with someone who has just this absolute depth of knowledge of about the game and has commentated. At this point, he's probably got over 1,000 videos on his channel, right? I mean, just
Yes, very much
so
so.
so many rounds of commentary. I thought that was so clever to put them together.
And like,
And
if you didn't know it, you would not have known that it was his very first cast, I think. So yeah, they
exactly.
really did a great job of immediately getting that little bit of chemistry that you need if you're casting in a duo. And yeah, like, good job to everyone involved, because I can only assume it's not as easy as they made it look.
Exactly. Shout out to Farid for bringing the hype, definitely channeling his inner Butters for that cast. I definitely noticed a lot of excitement from him. And then Leo, man, Leo cracks me up. Leo had so many different quotes. One that really, I was actually driving in today, and I was listening to the cast, and it made me laugh. He said, "Don't be silly, lead Cradilly." I was like, "Oh my god, that is so accurate."
He's a jokester.
That is so accurate. But yeah, ZZ, outside of the cast and production, I think everything is great. The Frankfurt stream really showed us that things were firing on all cylinders. Are there any runs that you want to get into in the group stage of the bracket before we get into Top Cut? Because I really feel like this tournament felt very akin to Pittsburgh in the sense that you had so many former regional champs, former IC champions, world champions competing, and it just felt like this was a literal knife fight all the way through this entire bracket. I mean, you have so many names from EU like Howie, Cookshack. You have Alejandro DL, Inadequance, RGR, Pato Man, and that's all in Group A. All the names I
Yeah,
just said are in
yeah.
one single group. Like, come on, be real.
There's honestly so many. Like, I think what really was being showcased in Frankfurt as well is the depth of quality we have in Europe, because like
Agree.
you've mentioned all those really well established names, but if you, like, for example, take a look at Group D, you
Mm-hmm.
also have people like you had the group finals between Ripoli, who was the 21st seed, and King OWT, who was the 10th seed. And we know that both of those players are really, really good. Like Ripoli is consistently strong in GBL, isn't really. Listener of the podcast, by the way, shout outs to Ripoli here. I had a really nice conversation in Frankfurt with him. Um, and yeah, hasn't been as committed to play Pokemon so far. And King OWT, very strong showing in, I believe it was Birmingham last year, but also nobody who is known for flying out to too many regionals. So the 21st seed versus the 10th seed of the group in group finals. And you were
Mm-hmm.
still not really surprised because those
Yeah.
names already had proven that they belong up there with the best. Um, but yeah, like they had to fight through a real gauntlet, like Ripoli starting off against the Gengar Live, consistent page one leaderboarder. Follow the Gengar Live on twitch.tv. Then 2-1 against Pokesquark, 2-1 against Dane WWW, also somebody who has won a medal before. Then a 2-1 against Bats with the um, there's like a batshit crazy pun in there with his Meowscarada team.
I love it.
Um, to then make it to group finals and go down 1-2 to King OWT, who, like, in his own right, beat players like MW MW22, who I think
Mm-hmm.
maybe a Polish battler who has been doing fine in the past. Fatali Snacks, who I think maybe made top cut in, was it Bologna last season? It was like towards the end of last season. And then
Mm.
Snorek, who has been in multiple top cuts before, to then reach the group finals and actually beat Ripoli 2-1. So like you only have high profile opponents, and then you have the 21st against the 10th seed in the group finals. And I feel like that's just what Europe is. Like there's
Yeah.
like even your first round is never easy here.
Exactly, exactly. I've been kind of eyeballing Group C as well. This is a group where you had Nighttime Clasher as well as Scafo, the Mega Junko, Stone Collection. You had EU Udin as well as Boom. Boom had a really impressive run, but was defeated by one of the old guard in Stone Collection in the semifinals, only to fall down to that loser side bracket and defeat Nighttime Clasher, defeat Withered, and to win the rematch versus Stone Collection. So I mean, it's so amazing too because you look at that group and you see all those really high profile names, and then you look at who actually won the group, and it was Chris
Yeah.
LB7 versus Stone Collection, which is a trainer that we haven't heard too much about, and it's not that familiar. So yeah, this was absolutely an insane bracket. Looking at this, I was like, my gosh, anyone who entered this tournament had to be sweating. But because there was only 107 players and there was no top 16, the groups are also a bit bigger. So you might have those trainers split up into smaller groups if the tournament was larger. Um, Going into day
Okay,
number
well, well,
two.
well, well, while we're on this topic, this is
Yes.
just like something that I want to mention. EU trainers, get your casual friends and make them sign up to these events, because like even though this like feels so stacked, I I feel as if a lot of that is because only the top trainers even register. Whereas in Pittsburgh, you still had a ton of really high caliber players, but
Mhm.
there were a lot of people who were just like casually going with friends, having fun and trying their best, and all of a sudden the tournament is like 80 people bigger. And we want the numbers to rise in Europe, just like so we can like point towards that number and see like, oh, Pokemon Go is growing. Oh, Pokemon Go should remain a part of the championship series. Very difficult word. And yeah, I feel like people should dare to compete a little more or dare to go to these events, even if it's an intimidating field. Because I don't know, I thought the attitude when I entered Pittsburgh was
Hmm.
a lot of people were just playing for the fun of it, and I think that's lovely. I think we need that
Yeah.
undercurrent of just like casual getting into the scene without fear of strong opponents, to really have sustainable growth within the scene. Because if you are new right now, like I guess this is going to be easier once we get Swiss, which was hinted at. But like you need to start somewhere, right? And I feel as
Yeah.
if like even though we have this big depth, like this pool of top trainers, um, I want to see more like unknown names rather than like all the names being kind of known, but just a lot of them.
I have a confession. So when when Pokemon Go first entered the Championship Series, I looked at the numbers for TCG, and they've only gone up since 2022. But I used to kind of laugh at the TCG players who would go and compete when you had 2,000 or 3,000 more players, and I used to think like, how many of them realistically think they can beat Azul, or how many of them realistically think they can take down Tord Reklev in the finals? Like who really thinks that they can actually win this whole thing? And this is just such an interesting psychological moment that we were kind of in, because Pokemon Go for the first two seasons was win it all or just
Yeah.
falter. If you won an event or play second, you got your world's qualification, and that was it. But then they introduced championship points, and of course, we're still, I think, emotionally and mentally like adapting to the fact that you can grind these events, that you don't have to win all the time in order to qualify for worlds. And again, I used to laugh at these TCG players. So like, my God, they're so delusional. Like, there's 3,000 people here, and they really think that they are like the chosen one. Like, what kind of weird ego does it take to walk into the room and think that, unless you're someone like Tord Reklev? But I've kind of come around on that. I've come around on the opinion that you don't have to just win. You play because you love to compete. And I think that is
Exactly.
a driving force that Pokemon Go as a community is still kind of learning and adapting and opening their minds up to. And to your point exactly, having people that are just there to play for the love of the game, I think is important, and we need to embrace that. Pokemon community members have a reputation for complaining, for always pointing out things that are wrong. And I know the double elimination bracket is not perfect, and I'm never going to sit here and say, from my privileged point where I actually get flown in to cast the events, oh, people should spend their money to come here and go 0-2 just so we can have a bigger bracket, because that sounds super selfish, and it is selfish to think that way. But honestly, if we had more people actually competing because they enjoyed the game, because they wanted to spend time with friends, and it wasn't too much of a hindrance on their finances or their day-to-day lives, I think it'd be great. It'd be great for the entire community. So I hope that we continue to grow, because this is something I wanted to touch on with Monterrey, and we will get there.
Hmm.
But I noticed only 107 trainers in Frankfurt, and when I went in
Yeah.
2022 for EUIC, that is a massive airport. That is a
Yes.
gigantic airport, and it felt like an easy place to fly into. So what happened? You know?
It's so accessible. It's much more accessible than Dortmund used to be, and it's like slightly bigger than Dortmund, but not to the degree that I would have expected or at least hoped for. And one thing, like one little bit of perspective that I also want to give is
Mhm.
that like growing the bracket also grows the price pool in a way. Like not really in terms of the very top of it, but if we
Kickers.
had, yeah, exactly. Like if we hit the 129 people kicker, more people would get championship points and more people would get TCG packs for their performance. So you're only growing the pie, and like obviously it's um, difficult to just say that, oh, you person that currently doesn't compete, start competing because the pie needs to grow. But I just feel as if there's so much in it for so many people if we had the dynamic that other regions may already have in Europe.
I agree. I agree with you. I can't find the information about the kickers offhand as easily as I would have liked, but we should talk about that as well, because that was a big update for this season. The kickers were kind of restructured based on performance, and Yeah, this is something that came up internally when it comes to Pittsburgh as well, because a lot of us commentators will quote the number on Challenge because that's the number that we know. But if you actually look through the bracket and you look at no shows, people that obviously just didn't even arrive to compete, that kind of counts against the overall attendance because obviously they're not physically there. So while we might see 181 on Challenge, it might not always be the actual number. And if we see 107 on Frankfurt's Challenge, we know that at least a few people probably had an interrupted flight, couldn't make it in for whatever reason, overslept, whatever it might be. So, yeah, that's an interesting thing. And I know I had a conversation briefly with Necra backstage in Pittsburgh, and she looked across the table and said, if Go was Swiss, I would compete because I don't want to go there and have O2 and then just have my entire weekend gone. I would rather if I got to play 7 rounds of gameplay on day one, I would consider it a good investment because it's good practice. It's good for me as a trainer for experience, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's my personal opinion. I agree with you though. This Frankfurt bracket was very, very heavily influenced by a lot of mainstays that we've seen throughout the competitive circuit. And like you said in the intro, some things never change. So maybe we should slide over and take a look at the day two bracket. ZZ, I recognize that you also were able to make kind of a pseudo day two. They saved some matches from day one and had them in day two just for the content, I believe.
It's like a real day two, but a fake top cut in a way. I'm just counting day twos. So
Okay.
like in terms of day twos, I still have made every single day two in the 2025 calendar year when I entered the tournament. So I am proud of that. But it is the second top cut that I missed. So there's
Okay.
that.
That's fair. That's fair. If I'm not mistaken, I think that Jonkus actually commentated one of your matches, which I thought was really cool because then it meant that you had one brother competing and one brother commentating, which I don't know if that's been done. I feel like the only other opportunity for that would have been if Nighttime Clasher commentated Sustenance Eater, which I have not seen that happen. So
Yeah, I don't think
yeah,
that has
that
happened yet.
it was the semifinals of Group B versus Emmy Weedle, who eventually, as you alluded to, took you down with Lantern. You had one more win against IBI, but then were knocked out by 19 Lawrence 92. So something I want to come back to that I will ask you about later is how your experience in Frankfurt helped prep you for Pittsburgh. But let's go
Mhm.
ahead and jump into the day two meta. So is there anything that you want to point out about our top 8 trainers? I mean, you had Emmy Weedle with Lantern, Boom with Thunderfang Steelix, and Gliscopod, which I thought was a dead Pokemon, but he revived it. You had some Wigglytuffs, some Togekiss. What do you think?
So I think like a couple cores stand out to me, and like a couple archetypes that then translated to practice tournaments, maybe to future events, maybe are already derived from past events.
Uh,
For example, if you look at the day two in Frankfurt, you have Stone Collection, you have King OWT, and you do have Alfie, all with a team that features a fire flying type, a normal type, and a fairy type. Like it's
mm,
more typical of that archetype of team to feature Furret and Tinkaton. Alfie did switch it up a little bit with the Dunsparce and Togekiss, so a little bit more spicy and inventive, but I think that is um, just like a combination, like a triple core of Pokemon that we've seen a couple times already, and I think it probably started with Philbeck and Philbeck's victory in Bologna last season, where he
oh,
managed to go undefeated. And the start of the show, surely it was that Shadow Malamar that he had on his team, but he also had that combination of, I think it was a Talonflame, a Furret, and a Tinkaton. So those three Pokemon, like whether it's Talonflame or Shadow Zard, it's whether you like fast move or charge attack damage more, it's essentially a dealer's choice. Um, but yeah, I think um, choosing your ghost type counter as a normal type makes a lot of sense with the fire flying star of your team, because if you were choosing a dark type as your answer to ghost types, you would leave yourself vulnerable to a Azumarill, because that would the water typing would counter the fire flying, whereas the fairy typing would counter the dark. So if you have a fire flying, you typically want to go with the normal for that role. Um, and then
Such a good point.
also the fairy typing, which in turn helps to mainly keep the Furret safe. Like the Dunsparce Togekiss dynamic is a little different, or you have like you want to protect that from Mudslappers more, whereas you want to protect your Furret from opposing Sucker Punchers or like Moltres first and foremost
Mm,
is where you want to protect it from, because
absolutely.
your Sucker Punches are resisted. So you want to use a fairy type like Tinkaton for that. So like those three like always have like really good synergy between each other, and three of those teams making it to day two in Frankfurt made me think of that as something that we can note down and essentially say, okay, that is an archetype of a team that we can run and be comfortable with. I think players like Ed Shearer also used it in Pittsburgh to good
Mm.
success. Um, whereas, yeah, like there's other archetypes too, but this was one that stood out to me because it was so common. Yeah, do you did anything stand out to you, Speedy, in terms of team composition on those top performing teams?
Yeah, I really like your point about Furret and Tinkaton. As I look over the entire top cut, I actually see that multiple times. To your point exactly, and there's one Tinkaton team without Furret, but it's got a Diggersby instead. So the normal plus Tinkaton seems to be a very very prominent strategy, and we saw that a couple times as well in the Pittsburgh stream. If there was a Galarian Moltres lined up against the Furret, it was just lights out. It was no good. Um, Something you mentioned as well before we started recording was the Dragon and Steel combination, which I thought was really strong. The Shadow Giratina Altered and Shadow Scizor on Martine's team, or the Shadow Scizor plus Gudra on Patoman's team. It seems like a really good combination. Those two Pokemon, in terms of typings, are usually nemesis, right? They always clash against each other, but when they are paired together, very, 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 very strong. There's so I have like a unified theory of team building after Frankfurt and Monterrey, but I want to get into it post Monterrey because I think it makes the most sense after that.
Okay, okay, fair enough.
But because it just ties the two together. But again, I mentioned this earlier. The rise of electric types in the meta is something that definitely surprised me. I made a joke with you in Pittsburgh. I said, "Oh yeah, well, Charge Bug is just a European Pokemon. Those Europeans are always bringing the bug," and we did see several of those in Frankfurt as well. But yeah, I mean, oh, I will say this. I will say this. I'm so glad I didn't forget. We did have Boom in the top 8 with Shadow Steelix. Everyone was talking about newly buffed Dragon Tail Steelix being the play, but it was so fascinating to me how we get into this new meta and it's back to Thunderfang. It's
Right.
Thunderfang in Frankfurt, it's Thunderfang in Monterrey as well as Pittsburgh. And I think there is a distinct reason for that. That's part of my unified team building theory that we'll talk about later. But yeah, Thunderfang Steelix, where
Yeah,
everyone
I
thought it
think
would go to
it
Dragon
just
Tail.
fills the electric type role, right? Like it's like a pseudo electric,
Perfect.
but like you don't really have dragon like dragon only hits dragon for super effective. You don't have that many targets, whereas you do cover waters and flying types with electric damage. So that is just a lot more interesting in terms of, okay, where do you want to apply your damage. And also, like, I think one of the reasons why Dragon Tail Steelix was projected to be excellent was because we didn't know breaking swipe parameters yet. So it
Mm,
was projected that you would reach a breaking swipe with a guaranteed debuff in 4 Dragon Tails, but it's actually 5 Dragon Tails now, and the move is more expensive, and it's overall less of a good deal.
yeah.
So yeah, I definitely see that. And I do want to mention also, I think we first saw that during the in-between meta early in March, where we had 2 tournaments where Golisopod and Shadow Steelix worked in tandem very well together.
Mm.
And Boom brought that back, and I think this is a combination of Pokemon that we will see more of in the future as well. I believe that in Pittsburgh we also had people trusting that combination.
Obviously, the grand finals were insane. I'm sure we'll get into that momentarily. But one other series I wanted to shout out was the losers round one versus Boom, excuse me, with Boom versus Pato. That series was absolute cinema. Glycepod for Boom almost did the impossible to take down Patoman's Corsola. I believe it came down to a decisive game number 3. And the way that Pato was able to win is he essentially Dragon Breath down the Glycepod with his Gudra. And just the second that the X Scissor was loaded and ready to go, the Dragon Breath applied and KO'd the Glycepod. I think if Boom
Yeah.
gets that X Scissor, I think he wins that game because he had the crunch stored on his Steelix already. But because Pato gets the full farm down, he's able to double Aquatail the Steelix and win. That series was insane. And I feel like if you watch back Worlds 2024 in Hawaii, we got to see trainers like David, like Beelzeboy. And I feel like when you see a matchup like this between Pato and Boom, you're seeing the next generation of PvPers, and it's so exciting.
Arguably the current generation too,
Arguably,
but yeah,
yes.
like the future is in good hands. Like
Yeah.
those guys are going to be like able to excel at the top of the game for as long as they want, essentially. And yeah, it was the first time Boom got eliminated from a tournament, and who else would it be than the best EU player of last season in Pokémon to finally take him down? He got
Yeah.
demoted to losers by I think Stone Collection previously, but yeah, the first time Boom didn't win, still a top 8 finish. Like what can you say? Like
Yeah.
uh,
Can't be mad at that.
yeah, EU's future is cracked beyond belief, as they say.
Yeah, I did see a nice post, and I don't expect you to respond to it, so I'll drop this, and then we'll go into grand finals. But I did see a nice post from Pata Man. I know that you two have a history of battling each other. I saw he called you his goat on X, and I thought that was very very kind. I don't expect you to respond unless you want to, but I thought that was very nice.
I can just
Um,
say that I appreciate that a lot. I feel like I think with my whole oh I always come second thing, like I do have a gold medal. It's right there. It's right there on
yeah,
the wall. But like with 4 grand finals losses in a row, I do want to prove it to myself more than to anyone else. But I was very grateful for all the support that I received and all the kind of words. So it's I did read that. I'm still just like coming home, settling back in.
yeah.
But so I haven't replied to everybody yet, but very very much appreciated.
Well, not to I apologize for maybe getting a bit ahead of ourselves, but we have
It's all
another
right.
grand finals to talk about. Let's go ahead and talk about the Frankfurt grand finals where Inadequance took on 9 Alfie 9 in one of the most as far as team compositions go, one of the most European grand finals I think we've ever had. I mean,
uh,
you literally had a Wigglytuff staring down a Togekiss, a Blastoise staring down a Cradilly, a Shadow Talonflame looking at a Shadow Charizard, a Shadow Scizor versus a Dunsparce, and a Shadow Giratina Altered versus a Galarian Corsola. This was, I mean, there was only one shared Pokemon between each team. I don't know if that's a record or not, but that was absolutely just a showcase. I loved it. I loved every second.
yeah, it's like and one thing that I especially loved was because like we have talked a lot about Frankfurt so far. We haven't talked about Martine a lot because like
That's true.
Inadequance, like obviously our first European champion, and the thing about him is that I feel as if, like, when we talk about the best players of the current moment, a lot of that has to do with how often they compete, how often they remind us of their quality. And
Recency
nobody has
bias.
ever, exactly. And nobody has ever really doubted Martine's ability. Like, his one bad tournament run came with Rayquaza. We know that it's Quasar now, not Quasar. Um, but everything else the man has done has just been excellent for like years on end. But he hasn't played as much because he was focused more on the casting aspect. They call him the do it all Dutchman after all, so
It's
he's
true.
doing it all. But now he went back into competing. Nobody really knew like is he like trolling with the Giratina? Is he cooking with the Giratina? And yeah, it turned out that just like in Utrecht, like a year and a half ago at this point, he was just onto something that everybody else was ignoring. Part of that was the rise of Charger Bug, which was popular back then when Giratina won as well.
Oh, I
And
remember.
unless Charger Bug is running Crunch, you just walled the entire moveset. So that is a fairly nice feature of that particular dragon. Um, but also just like the way Giratina evades some of the supposed ghost counters, because while the Dunsparce on Alfie's team is very well equipped at taking down Galarian Corsola, which can't really two-shot it ever and is also relatively slow to its moves. When a
Mhm.
Shadow Giratina lands two Dragon Claws, it's able to Shadow Claw down in the one-shot scenario. So that was not actually that hard of a counter. And which was very, like one thing that was very serendipitous is also that in Utrecht, Martijn showed the world what a like charge attack priority catch looks like, where you
Yes.
swap on a move, press your own attack, win charge attack priority, and essentially get your damage off while also ridding the opponent's Pokemon of all its energy. That was a high level play that Martijn showcased back then.
He did it
Now,
against
like,
Charjabug too.
yeah. Like, that was like very much how I remember that, oh, that was a charge bug meta as well. So yeah, that was like a highlight play that you can clip and make a segment out of to replay for the next regional.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether this is going to be clipped and made a segment out of, but another thing that really showcased a mechanic of Pokemon Go PvP that Martijn did was in the first game of the Grand Finals. He was in an endgame situation where he tries to Shadow Claw down a Galarian Corsola by swapping in his Giratina. It survives on 1 HP, but it's exactly 1 HP. So he can charge attack priority tie the Galarian Corsola with his leftover Gastron, which still has a charge attack left. And even though Alfie still had a shield at that moment, Martijn still managed to pick up the knockout through that shield, because every shield reduces the charge attack damage to 1. It doesn't nullify it, it just reduces it to 1. So if you are at a singular HP, you still lose the game. And that very rarely happens, but it does happen. And in that high stakes moment, it was Martijn's win condition, and he executed on it and took that first game in very dramatic fashion.
It's almost like Inadequance has this ability to look through the catalog of top 1% maneuvers in competitive Pokemon Go and just kind of flip through the folders and then just pull out whichever one he wants to actually execute on stream. His bag is so deep that he's able to just reach in and grab out things that most other people would not even consider or even think
He had
about.
some nasty turn weights as well, where people like tried to catch his energy throughout the tournament, but nope,
Yes.
not happening. Not against this guy. So yeah,
Yes.
it's always just like a real feast for the eyes to watch Martin compete with like 60% RPS, 40% absolute crazy spice, and 100% go to the place, as they say. So um, it
Yeah.
was
What
because
was.
like Shadow Talonflame, Wigglytuff, Gastrodon. That is a little RPS, but there's also nobody better at using it, because that core, with the regular Talonflame, to be honest, that core also did carry Shadow Palkia to an EOIC trophy earlier this year. So he's kind of bringing back the classics, and yeah, he's been doing it in spectacular fashion.
Yeah, you just reminded me of a quote by a group called Fort Minor, which is Mike Shinoda of Linkin Park. This is kind of corny, but I'm quoted anyway, right? 15% concentrated power of will, 5% pleasure, 50% pain, and 100% reason to remember the name. And I feel like Martine approaches his tournaments that way because, like you said, no one knew what to expect. Right? Is he cheesing? Is he just bringing in a different legendary dragon in order to have fun with it? Uh, but I feel like maybe personally, after Martine commentated Worlds and was obviously stellar as a commentator, I feel like he might have gotten this sense like, oh, I commentated and I really enjoyed it, but I do not want people to forget that I can also play with the best of them. And it's not that he has like a chip on his shoulder, but he definitely goes into these tournaments with the sense that he has something to prove, which I think is an important distinction because someone with a chip on their shoulder is like rash and easily offended and things like that. I don't see Martine that way. I see him as very cool and calm in his approach, but mentally there's a firestorm in his head at all times, and you can
He's
see that
just
on
really
stage.
he really enjoys like putting on display the things he can do because he knows that okay, like this is a little special, and like he always has fun on stage too, which I always love
Yeah,
to see.
yeah.
And yeah, that way he's been putting on a show for sure.
Exactly. Well, as you alluded to in the grand finals, we can get into a closer analysis of this. Game one, Inadequance leads Shadow Scizor into Gastrodon. He does bring that Shadow Giratina altered form, not only to game one, but to all four battles of the grand finals, which I thought was really, really cool. One note I wanted to make about that Pokemon is that I looked in the Sims because my Shadow Giratina altered is total dog crap. It's like 1461. It's so bad.
Oh no,
But
oh no.
I looked at all the Sims and I thought, well, if it's gonna win matchups and if it's still that strong, I'll go ahead and build it. What I notice is that Giratina Altered, it beats up on a lot of the lower meta stuff, a lot of things that you won't see very much of, but it struggles really hard against top meta, against all the fairy types, all the steel types, all that kind of stuff. And what Inadequance did multiple times is he applied enough pressure and created an opening for the Giratina to succeed. And you could argue it was primarily due to the fast attack pressure that he was exerting with the Incinerate, with the Charm, whatever, with the Mud Slap, whatever it might be. But it was also in part of due to the way that he played Scizor and Blastoise. Blastoise was such a wedge for him. He was studious enough and kind enough to send me a graphic of all the times that he shielded his Pokemon and all the times that he brought his Pokemon, and he brought Blastoise the most out of any of his picks. And like you and I have talked about, Blastoise is not a flashy Pokemon. It's not going to disrupt the whole show and just have these stunning knockouts like a Blastburn Charizard might have. But it is a wedge. It's an absolute unit. And again, I'm just going back to the combination of the fast
Hmm.
attack pressure plus the Blastoise wedge, and then the Shadow Scizor being hyper aggressive and taking shields. I thought was just the perfect blend of Pokemon. And
Yeah.
when I look across the field to Pittsburgh and to Monterrey, I almost wonder if this blending of fast attack pressure and charge attack pressure that Martine always brings on his teams, I'm wondering if that was kind of a lost art that wasn't as well translated to the other tournaments. But I don't know. I'm sure we'll get into that.
I also
It
want to
looks
mention
like,
that I think Blastoise Scizor is an excellent core. I
uh,
did have that on my team of six as well in practice leading up to the event. And I ultimately decided to drop the Blastoise because my team was soft to Galarian Moltres. And Blastoise
uh,
does win the two shield scenario against Galarian Moltres, but struggles in the 0 and 1 shield scenario against Galarian Moltres. So I looked at Martine's
yeah.
team and I was like, oh, if I struggled with Blastoise instead of Azumarill when I faced the Galarian Moltres, how did he do against Galarian Moltres? And if memory serves me correctly, he faced two Galarian Moltres teams. First of all, I think he faced like four different Italians that tournament. So I don't know why he has it out against the Italians, but
I don't know. Sounds
um,
personal.
yeah, like I would maybe like think about why that happens. Um, but yeah, I think he faced two Galarian Moltres. There was a match against Alejandro off stream where
Hmm.
I think he went 1-2.
Yes,
Um, and then there was a 2-0 victory over a Mind Joke on stream,
correct.
but a Mind Joke didn't bring the Galarian Moltres once.
Hmm.
And I was a little bit surprised about that because there is that Wigglytuff bench pressure, that is true.
Sure.
But even Wigglytuff doesn't resist a Brave Bird if you get some energy somewhere. And other than that, one losses that Shadow Talonflame has compared to regular Talonflame is the two shields against Galarian Moltres. Blastoise, as I mentioned, needs to two shield to win that. Shadow Scizor is like half decent, but the energy gets walled. And then
Hmm.
there's a Shadow Giratina that doesn't want to get sucker punched, and a Gastrodon that essentially doesn't want to mud slap a flying type.
Agreed.
So I was really wondering like how Martine made it through the onslaught of Galarian Moltres that we saw in like parts of the tournament. And I feel as if the answer to that is he avoided them for the most part, and if he didn't avoid them, they weren't brought out against him as much. So like I was wondering, will people just copy that team and call it a day, or will they maybe add some extra insurance against Galarian Moltres. It ended up being the case that nobody really had the guts to bring a Shadow Giratina to a tournament, which I understand that like you have to be built different to run that. Um, but yeah, I would have loved to just see Martine maneuver around the Galarian Moltres because I think it is possible, but it would have been difficult, and I would have just loved to see how he would have approached that challenge. It didn't come to that, but that was just like an observation that I made when looking at this team and potential weaknesses.
You're exactly right. I'm looking over the rounds that Inadequance played versus Lenono, Alejandro, a Mind Joke, Potaman, Chris, and then twice versus 9 Alfie. It's so fascinating too because you only see the 2 Galarian Moltres, but Martine actually went up against 4 other Wigglytuff, which is also remarkable in my mind, considering he did have the Giratina altered form. But to your point exactly, the Wigglytuff is going to apply pressure to that Giratina, but it doesn't have the core breaking potential that a Galarian Moltres does against a Mud Slapper plus a Giratina plus a neutral Blastoise matchup plus a Glassy Scizor, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's very interesting. You point that out. I feel like so many times, like we try to pick the team that has the perfect coverage versus everything, but I mean, every now and then it comes down to just not running into the things that you are deathly weak to. Because every Pokemon trainer, no matter if you're playing trading card, VG, Unite, whatever, you can't cover everything, and that is the great team building challenge of Pokemon Go and competitive Pokemon in general. So, yeah, that's actually a really, really good point by you. I didn't realize he only battled 2 Moltres. Game 3 of the grand finals is the only one that Alfie defeated Martine in. So this kind of mirrored their previous matchup, resulting in a 3-1. In that game number 3, Inadequance led the Blastoise into the Galarian Corsola. Alfie won the lead, but Martine got a 3 Shadow Claw farm down on the Galarian Corsola. Dunsparce comes out for Alfie at that point. Alfie calls a Trailblaze onto his Gastrodon. He mud slaps down the Scizor before the second Trailblaze is ready to go. So again, very small margins there. And then the Gastrodon mud slaps down the Giratina to win it. So that was a competitive game, but I noticed in the body language on stage. Obviously, if you're coming from the winner side bracket, you're going to be more confident. But I noticed on stage, Martine did not seem bothered. He didn't seem upset with the game loss. He kind of locked in and just did his thing. I think he very much kept in mind the long game and how many times he would have to lose in order for Alfie to win the championship. And then game 4, Martine rights the ship. He leads that Giratina Alter form into Gastrodon and takes down the Dunsparce Togekiss backline that Alfie had. And he did it with a Gastron and a Wigglytuff. So you could argue the Gastron versus the Togekiss would have been disastrous, but being able to control Switch by forcing Alfie to swap in the Dunsparce kind of lined things up for him.
Yeah, I want to make two further callouts for games 3 and 4. So
Yeah.
in game 3, the final situation comes down to the shield call of whether Martine would bait with a Night Slash or just immediately go for the Trailblaze because yeah, he was only ever getting to a small move and a big move. Um, and yeah, I think the reason why Martine did go for the Trailblaze was because in game 2 previously, even though Martine won that, he did see that Alfie was willing to call a body slam on his Corsola when the Gastrodon had the Water Pulse energy ready. And if like so he was essentially going into that endgame scenario with the knowledge that Alfie is comfortable calling the bait when it was like such a 50-50 scenario. This time Alfie didn't call the bait, turned out to be the exact right choice again and resulted in a game win for Alfie. And one thing that I want to call out about game 4, like I've heard people being surprised about why Alfie stayed in with the Gastrodon against the Giratina Altered at first, because that's just not a good matchup. But yeah, he did a lot of mud slaps before eventually dipping into the Dunsparce. And I think the reason for that is that the entire line that Alfie brought was really, really, really weak to Shadow Scizor. So it made sense to already build up energy to make it so that you won't have to throw 5 mud slaps if you were to if you needed to take out a potential Shadow Scissor in the late game,
Mhm.
because that's what you would have needed in order to take out the Shadow Scissor, with the last Pokemon being a Togekiss. So just setting himself up for a potential combo play situation in the late game. There ended up not being a Shadow Scissor, so it didn't really come into play. But I can see, like, with how the line would have worked into all six of Martine, why he decided to stay in initially. So not
Agreed.
actually a misplay, just like covering for a potential backline Pokemon.
Agreed. It's very poetic. Again, your intro is absolutely on point per usual. Things change, but some things stay the same. And Inadequate's being able to fast move and finesse his way through certain matchups, and it's such a unique thing to watch as well, because it almost feels like he's taking more risk by playing these alignment dependent Pokemon, but he just makes it work. There's just something about how he calculates out the matches and how he thinks about the gameplay, where he's not afraid to push all of his chips to the middle of the table and go all in when he thinks he's got the win condition. I think that comes down to confidence in team reading and prediction, because he's done so many battles and so many scrims. I mean, he's got a very good idea of what to expect. Shout out to Alfie as well, a trainer that I was not very familiar with, making it all the way to grand finals and being toppled only by the do-it-all Dutchman and World's runner-up. And he did it with a team that featured Togekiss, Dunsparce, Shadow Charizard. What a wild team from Alfie.
Yeah, it just like goes to show that Italians should travel out of their region more, because I don't know, I feel like a lot of like there's a lot of talent in that country, but like most of the events that Alfie did so far were Torino, Bologna. Then he did Stuttgart and UIC last year, but
Mhm.
again Bologna. So like as of now, like 50% of the events he ever did were in Italy. But I feel as if, like, especially his last two results, which were the seventh place in Bologna, as well as the runner-up now in Frankfurt, should give him the confidence to maybe try his luck at some more international locations, because he definitely has the quality to make it far.
I agree. I would love to see Alfie battle some more. I think that getting that close to a grand finals victory, I feel like, especially for a trainer that's stepping outside of their region for the first time, I think that's highly encouraging. And I would love to see Alfie compete more as the season goes on. I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to add to Frankfurt. I think it was a great way to start off the season, and again, Inadequance reasserting his dominance atop the Pokemon Go hierarchy as expected. Did so well, and I'm so proud of him. If you're
Yeah.
ready, we could move on to Monterrey.
Yeah, let's go to the Danic country, as I like to call it, because it is the only regional so far that has featured the polarizing electric mouse in Top Cut.
Exactly. So, Monterrey, this is a tournament that we did not get a stream for. Unfortunately, I would have loved to see the battles. I think we say this about every LATAM's tournament, and hopefully we start to get those streams. But you're exactly right, ZZ. Looking at the meta here from our Dracoviz top cut graphic, third place, excuse me, second place, third place, and fourth place, as well as one, two, three, four times outside of that, within our top 16 alone, there was Dedenne. And it's so funny not seeing it at all in Frankfurt and then seeing it in spades here. But this tournament to me, before we get into the actual meta, I just wanted to say that this tournament to me felt like an experiment in terms of scheduling that I think did not pay off the way that TPCI probably would have liked. Now, what I'm getting at is the fact that we only had 171 trainers register for Monterrey, and last season, it was literally 100 trainers bigger than that. And I feel like that's a huge discrepancy. Same city, same country, of course. And the difference in trainers is just insane. I mean, that's literally like
That
bleeding
is that is
almost
wild.
almost half of your attendance, which is not a good metric to track. So,
Do you have any insight in what they did different, or is it really just like time of year?
so actually, I think you already hit the nail on the head. So Monterey last year was in April 2025. You had 275 competitors. This year it was in September, which is just after Worlds, and I think you can agree with this. I think anyone across the world, to be honest, can agree with this. The trip to go to the US is very expensive. If you're going to compete at Worlds in Anaheim, literally Disney Town, If you're going to travel internationally from Brazil or from EU or wherever you might be traveling from, Australia, Japan, etc., the flights are expensive, the hotels are expensive, eating is expensive, and I feel like this tournament coming just right after Worlds was a big, big scheduling mistake. And I feel like I could see it. I could see the vision, right? Because this is Mexico. This is not the southern area of LATAM. This is not Argentina. This is not Chile, etc. This feels like it should be more accessible, especially for trainers that maybe are in North America. And we did have several go down to Monterrey to compete, just like last year. But at the same time, I'm noticing two different groups that really showed out and showed up, and those were the Brazilians, the LNDs team, as well as the 7-Eleven team. And we know that there's team arrangements where they're actually able to go to these events more affordably than people that are just flying on their own. So I really feel like this was, if this tournament would have been moved to April, I do think we would have had similar attendance. But just so quickly after Worlds, I saw 107 in Frankfurt, and I thought, oh well, that's not great. And then I saw a negative 100 for Monterrey. I said, oh, that's not good at all. So
Yeah.
that was concerning. But
Yeah, I don't believe this is going to be a trend necessarily, but it's certainly a development that maybe could have been avoided, but certainly is not what we have come to expect from Mexican events in particular, because those
yeah,
are like among the most attended. Like if you look at Monterrey, if you look at like I think Merida was capped, but could have been really big if they tried.
agreed.
Um, so yeah, there's like always like there's almost more demand than supply typically. Whereas yeah, this one was like smaller, but I feel as if in terms of quality, like if you look at that top cut, it's still so many big names that came out not only from Mexico but also from the US and specifically from Brazil.
Exactly, exactly. A lot of big names. This is kind of similar to what we talked about in Frankfurt. As I was scrolling through the bracket, I will say there were a lot more names in Monterrey that I did not recognize compared to Frankfurt. I do think there was much more name recognition over there, but
It has to do
um,
with stream matches too, right? Like there's
absolutely,
players like I was like talking to somebody recently where they were like um about like a practice match situation against somebody called Dell 31416, and they were like, I've never
yep,
heard of them. And I was like, that is actually one of the best Mexican competitors, and they made top eight
yeah,
again. But they just haven't had the exposure as much. Um,
yeah.
because of that lack of streams so far. So again, another season of hoping that that will change in the future. But yeah, I feel as if yeah, the name recognition isn't quite there, even though the quality of play may well be.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you and I know Dell's name because we've done these breakdowns and we've seen just how impressive they
Exactly.
are. But yeah, without the streams, without the recognition, it's easy to overlook some of these players. But to your original point about the meta, we saw a lot of similar developments that we noticed in Frankfurt. For example, a lot of ground being the Gastrodon. We saw Cradilly basically, as you said, mandatory on these teams. We saw flyers, but there was one big surprise that I really, really enjoyed watching. We saw some of this in Pittsburgh as well. Of course, I'm just going to say it's got to be Murkrow with Peck. What a fascinating pickup. More fairy types than we saw in Frankfurt, and way more in than we saw in Pittsburgh. Galarian Corsa also mandatory. So I feel like if you were listening to this and you want to build a competitive team that is solid for the next 2 months or so, if you focus on Galarian Corsa and Cradilly, you have two of the six pieces that you will need, and the rest is negotiable. Um, I want to dive in and talk about spice picks just real briefly, and then we'll talk about the overall teams and some of the themes that we were seeing. Did not mean to rhyme, but that's just how it turned out. K1W1 playing Torterra and Empoleon, which is really cool. We saw Torterra as well on Lauren's team in Frankfurt. Jen von Schweetz playing Shadow Annihilate, a little Worlds throwback there that I really did appreciate. Just a Wild Mango actually playing Furret plus Galarian Corsola plus Double Ground plus Togekiss, which is definitely fascinating. Then we had trainers like Arbasora with the Unova Stunfisk and Shadow Quagsire. I wanted to shout out Arbasora in particular as in regards to how they did in the bracket because our Arbasora I'm a big fan of. And then Dunebug trying to beat the Empoleon fraud watch by bringing Empoleon on his team. I'm sorry, champ. I still think it's a fraud, and I'm shocked actually that you made it that far with the penguin. But that
I
being
see
said,
I see the vision though, like Empoleon and Togekiss with two ground types to discourage electrics. There's
yeah,
something there.
yeah, well, then you just need to beat fighting, and you just need to beat ground, and you just need to beat grass. So there's a lot of open boxes that need to be checked off there, in my opinion. But the recurring themes I noticed were the two big teams that attended the Monterrey Regional Championships. Those being the Lindos with Kanan, Harjefe, and Steiner, all playing the exact same team of Galarian Corsola, Cradily, Gudra, Lantern, Galarian Moltres, and Shadow Scizor. And then the 7-Eleven group with one deviation that I will mention, but primarily you saw Gastrodon, Fortress, Cradily, Murkrow, Dedenne, and Galarian Corsola, and the exception being Richie, who Richie played Gastrodon, Clodsire, Cradily, Galarian Moltres, as well as Dedenne Corsola. So he changed two pieces. He changed the Fortress out for Clodsire, and he changed the Dark Flyer out for Galarian Moltres. So he just wasn't feeling the team, and he did his own thing. Perfectly okay. But I do think it's funny because we don't see this in Europe, right? I mean, outside of maybe like tea and pizza, we don't really see these trainers bringing the exact same teams.
Yeah, and that is actually something that I talked about with my grassroots team before, where like we're a little bit torn about whether it makes sense to just come up with the one team that is then the source for that weekend, and everybody knows how to play it, and it's the best option that we do have. And like if you have so many people running the same stuff, that you also have like 4 or 5 times the amount of play testing that goes into refining it compared to if you just do your own thing. So there's advantages to that approach. But then there's also like everybody having their own ideas and their unique Pokemon
Mm,
that they are very good at. And maybe like you see it with Richie, maybe Richie feels like, oh, I'm a better Moltres player, I'm a better Clodsire player than I am a Fortress or Murkrow player. And that's entirely
sure.
fine. And I feel as if even though there were two Murkrows that placed higher, like a fourth place finish. That doesn't mean that Richie was wrong. That is still a very, very high and impressive finish at a tournament as stacked as this. So,
I agree.
yeah, I do see the approach. And yeah, I noted those. I'm compiling my list of team archetypes, and
Ah,
both the LNDs team, which is the Shadow Scissor plus Dragon archetype that we already talked about, as well as the I call it the Iomurkrow team because we know that Iomero is a team builder for 7-Eleven primarily,
uh-huh.
um, and obviously the Murkrow is the standout pick. That also went into my folder of teams that I want to keep an eye on and know that I'm like kind of okay into them going forward.
Uh-huh.
Um, and yeah, I think like the way the team works. Um, is that you have the Murkrow as your main sweeper because a lot of people will not be prepared for it. They will not know the matchups. And it also just has great team core breaking potential into Mudsteppers and Corsola, as well as winning the
Mm,
head to head against Galarian Moltres. Um, but then the thing that you need to do is to like cover your bases in a way that Cradily doesn't become a problem because you obviously
yeah,
run a Mudstepper. Everybody runs a Mudstepper. Most people run a Mudstepper. Rajab actually managed to do without. But most people can. You can expect to have either Kanto Marowak or Gastrodon. In this case, they opted for Gastrodon mostly. And now if you have the Flyer and the Mudstepper, then you need something to protect this core from opposing Cradily because Cradily grass coverage, rock coverage, really strong core breaker into those two. So what do you do to scare it away? Most people say, oh, I just run Shadow Scissor. That's so good into Cradily. Can
sure.
you run Murkrow with its like primate level or even less stat product and a Shadow Scissor? I don't believe you can because you only get two
No.
shields per game. So you want something bulkier, something flexible. And 7-Eleven found that for the most part in Fortress. Richie with the Clodsire also bringing a pick that wins all even shields against Cradily and doesn't need to shield its moves. So similar in terms of how it functions. But yeah, the main answer was the Fortress paired with the Murkrow. Also very strong into fairy types. Same goes for Clodsire yet again. So yeah, I feel like that team slot was instrumental in protecting the Murkrow from its most common threats in the bracket.
It's so fascinating you point that out, and I feel like it's one of those things that we don't think about explicitly, but we notice over time because um, just in terms of general stat product. By the way, you're on the money. So Murkrow at rank 1 is 1584 stat product at level 43.5, and a Primeape at rank 1 is 1628 at level 24.5. So Murkrow is even glassier than a Primeape, which is staggering. Um, but I started to do a breakdown, and I don't think I've actually told you about this, but I started to analyze winning teams by stat product. And what I noticed is that 2100 is like the golden number. Most Pokemon on winning teams have about that in terms of stat product. And there's usually only one exception to that, whether it's a Primeape, a Scizor, a Greninja, a Murkrow. There's only one exception in terms of glassiness, but most teams have at least 2100 across the board on their other five Pokemon. So I think if you're looking through the PvPoke rankings and you're trying to find Pokemon that, oh, this will be really good one day if it gets buffed, like, I don't know, Dondozo. If you look at the stat product and you see that number, 2000 to 2200 or even more, then you are actually in really, really good shape. So I really appreciate that you brought that up because it looks like the obvious choice is Scizor. But the Fortress, with its additional bulk, gives you enough breathing room. It lets you get back to your switch timer. It lets you debuff the opponent as well with the Rock Tomb and set up the Murkrow even further in case you will need to survive an attack, which we did see a couple of attacks getting tanked by Murkrow over the weekend. But yeah, you really broke that down so well. I appreciate that. Um, in terms of overall meta, I think it's time. I think it's time for me to give you my unified theory. What do you say?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So you alluded to this. I'm making a timestamp right here. Unified team theory. You alluded to this before. You said everyone runs a Mudslapper, everyone runs a Cradilly. Based on the Monterrey results and the Frankfurt results, I kind of distilled everything down into slots. So essentially, you start with the first two. You start with a Galarian Corsola, or alternatively, you could play something like Dusclops. Then you move on to your Cradilly slot, which is typically very, very good roll compression. It's very hard to replace Cradilly, but you might kind of wedge in something like a Dugong with its anti-flyer capabilities or a Shadow Scizor with its Trailblaze capabilities in that slot as well. But 96% of the time, it's going to be Cradilly. Your third slot is a flying type, which is typically Galarian Moltres or Shadow Talonflame, but we have seen the occasional Murkrow. We have also seen Shadow Charizard fill that role. The fourth slot is a steel type. We've seen Tinkaton, Bastiodon. We've seen Corviknight in your case. We also see Shadow Scizor filling that role from time to time. The fifth slot is a ground or water type, and usually both. That being Gastrodon, but Shadowkit and Marowak also fills that role. And then you essentially have a flex slot as your sixth slot, but primarily it's geared towards anti-flying threats. So you'd have something like a Lantern, a Dedenne, Unova Stunfisk perhaps. Thunderfang Steelix also slots into that really, really nicely. It can serve as your steel type or your anti-flyer, depending on the rest of your team composition. But I feel like once you actually look at these Dracoviz graphics, and if you kind of mentally align the Pokemon into those different slots, Goodra also fits in the flex slot because it has Thunder Punch, and it also has access to Aqua Tail, which gives you a little bit more flexibility. So if you slot those things, it can work out. One more note I'll add is that Ice Punch Annihilate or Ice Punch Primeape also can fit into your anti-flyer slot while not being explicitly electric. But I do think that that is the unified theory, at least in this point of the championship series. And there are always exceptions. Furret, you can slot into your Ghost slot if you need a good safe switch with only minimal weaknesses. Togekiss fits into the flyer slot, but it's also a bit of an anti-grass and fighter as well. So there's a lot of flexibility. I don't know what you
Having it
think.
as an anti-flyer is so interesting because that is partly true, but it's mostly true if the premier flyer is Galarian Moltres, because then you resist the sucker punches while out damaging with your own charge attacks. Once
Yeah.
the dark flying type is Murkrow, however, those packs hurt. You do not
Yeah.
get to a lot of charge attacks as a primate.
Right? Yeah, they absolutely annihilate it. So that's why we've seen a primate here or there, and it was on my caster predictions for Pittsburgh just because of its core breaking potential, but it's not as successful as it has been in seasons past. I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to say about the overall meta. I think you made such a good point in the choice to pick up the Fortress over the Scizor. Murkrow was a big surprise. I played it in Go Battle League. I made a little video on it. I thought it was fun, but I thought it was too glassy. But getting to your moves in only 10 turns is definitely a huge upgrade.
Yeah, I feel like we've seen enough proof of concept for Murkrow to now recognize it as a real Pokemon. So, yeah, certainly the breakout star from this tournament. But yeah, the winning team was something else. It was Lantern and LNDsRargef.
Yeah, and speaking with Harjeff over in Pittsburgh, I think it was during our Pittsburgh Steelix draft segment that we did. Somebody asked him, I think it was maybe Arrow or Butters. Somebody asked him why Lantern. And he said because it's so fantastically neutral into everything. If you're up a bit of energy, you can spam off Surfs against the Kanto Marowak. So even your hardest counter, or maybe your hardest counter would be like a Gastrodon, but one of your hardest counters, you have a lot of pushback, and also the electric type pressure keeps Pokemon like Galarian Moltres at bay, keeps other pure water types that you might see at bay. So I do think that Lantern had an enormous amount of play. Before we get into grand finals completely, I do want to do a quick run through the bracket. This is a bit more of a closer look in terms of our bracket breakdown that we're going to try to add to the show going forward. I'll run through this real quickly, but I've got some notes on some of our groups. So in Group A, this was Harjeff's group. He ended up defeating Hector Minitoy 2-0 in the Group A finals, but also in this group were some notable names like Eduardo Lomas, Ing Beto, and Vic Rioja. Group B was Marto's bracket. Marto won 3 rounds before defeating Paul Garcia in the Group B finals. Group C, Arbasora. I mentioned this earlier. Arbasora, I'm a big fan of, friends with him. We battled when I was in Mexico City for the Niantic qualifier a while back, and I also ran into him at Worlds in Hawaii. Very good trainer. I had to RPS him out of my mind to win our group or win our battle when I faced him, but it looks like he's continued his winning ways by winning Group C. The losers finals was Richie versus Paco Bran in round 7. But Richie had to get through Rocha in losers round 6 in order to get there. So a little bit of 7-Eleven on 7-Eleven violence. You hate to see it, but it happens. Group D, losers finals was Dix Brooks versus K1W, which K1 won 2-0. Group E, Rise
I
defeated.
do want to just jump in here because
Yeah,
Dixbrooks I
yeah.
played in practice, and they were running a Snarl Scrafty, so we were very
What?
close to a Snarl Scrafty top cut there.
Holy crap. I had no idea. Okay. That would have been insane. I don't even know what that does. Like, what does that offer you? Does it beat
It
Corsola?
gets to upper hand really fast. I don't know. It's a Pokemon.
It is. It is. Group E, Rise defeated Andrew Manyares in the semis, but lost to Just a Wild Mango 1-2 in his group finals. However, he redeemed himself by falling down to the losers bracket and defeating Ramsey to win that and progress on to day 2. Group F, Eomero took down Dunebug 2-1. Dunebug won the Group F losers finals versus Yuri. Yuri was sent down to that losers bracket, interestingly enough, by Eomero, and he ended up beating Teddy GM10 and Javier C2182 before facing Dunebug in the losers finals. So Yuri, actually, a name I'm not very familiar with, but very, very talented. In Group G, winners finals was Lalo LG7 versus Jen von Schweetz. Lalo is the trainer that actually knocked me out of that Niantic Mexico City qualifier. I battled him twice, and he's very, very talented. And Jen, I believe, is still with 7-Eleven, but Jen defeated him. Desynct was in this group. You want to know what Desynct was running in Monterrey?
I think I took a look at it. Um, what was it?
I have it here. I can tell you.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I don't remember.
Okay, Desynct, always a fun trainer to watch, was running Shadow Dusclops, Empoleon, Gastrodon, which is the most normal of his Pokemon on his team, Gligar, Guzzlord, shout out to ZZ Guzzlord in Pittsburgh, and Shadow Alolan Ninetales. What a
Oh, the
team.
buffed weather ball.
Uh
Yeah.
huh.
I honestly can kind of see how Alolan Ninetales plays well into some of the top meta because
Yep.
if you're a Murkrow, you don't want to see that. if you're a Critili, you are like okay into that if shields are down, but nobody wants to like people save shields for the Alolan Ninetales, right? And
Yeah.
then as long as the ground type of the day is just a regular Kanto Marowak, that's probably
Yeah.
also pretty great for the Alolan Ninetales. So I
Yeah.
can see the
And if
vision.
if you're up against Galarian Moltres, that's also a pretty solid matchup. If you're facing off against a Furret, you're resisting all the sucker punches and you're pacing at the same rate to the Weather Ball or even slightly faster. So
That's very true.
I don't know. If you face a Unova Stunfisk, that's also a positive matchup for the Ninetales. I think there might be something to that. Um, Desynct lost in round two, though, unfortunately, to a trainer named Rasku193. Rasku was playing Altaria, Shadow Annihilate, Dusclops, Empoleon, Azumarill, and Cradily. So another spicy team. Group F was also home to TZ Spanx, who was the Monterrey runner-up last year. If you remember, he was in the grand finals versus Dunebug. TZ was defeated by Jen von Schweetz in round three, but he won 4 rounds in a row before being eliminated by Lalo in the Group G losers final. So TZ Spanx, our former runner-up, was almost in top cut. He just barely missed it. LNDS Kanan also was in Group G. And finally, we get to Group H, which is the last group of the tournament. LNDsTSteinar wins this group. He takes down Link On 2-1 in his group finals. Stud Muffins, which I didn't know was in Monterrey, actually traveled down to Monterrey and was battling it out there. He was knocked to losers in round two, but he won 3 more rounds before facing against Maurahol. Maurahol 15 in the losers round six. And then the Group H losers finals was Lincoln versus Marujo, and Lincoln won 2-0. So, again, I know the bracket breakdown is probably a little long winded, but I do think it's nice to give these trainers their shout outs and to let you know kind of like where everything went, especially for a tournament that we didn't have a stream for. I think it's good to kind of highlight like who was in which group and who was in losers finals, which normally would be off stream anyway. So, very, very exciting stuff. And then credit to Rise. And you sent me a video as well. I'm not sure who recorded that video, but credit to Rise and that individual for actually giving us the grand finals footage. So we actually got to see those games.
Yeah. So credits are going to Javier Young
Ah,
Machete, who did stream the finals in the Hangout Discord, and also to Mish for recording them. So we do have
heck
both
yeah.
perspectives, I think.
All right.
Um, and yeah, so what I remember from seeing that footage is um, that Rajev essentially tried to, I think, like bait out the fortress a lot because that was like one of the main threats. And yeah, tried to rely on the Galarian Corsola to take down that fortress. And I think like my perspective was a little bit cut off, but I think the first game he actually got the lead that he wanted with the Corsola into the fortress, and then
Mm-hmm.
eventually managed to align the Lantern onto the Murkrow. And the Murkrow tried to do something with pacing and shielded serves and tried to get out of it again, but honestly, those water guns kind of chunk. Um, so yeah, that's not the greatest place for a Murkrow to be.
Well, it was tough for
Um,
Spartan in that game as well because not only did he have the Lantern versus his Murkrow, but as soon as he did shield and get out, he sent out the Cradily and Harjefe had the Scizor. So it
yeah.
was like there's no escape really in that game one.
For sure. Yeah, that's again, that's the one thing that Critily never wants to see. Like once the bug
Yeah.
steel type comes out, it's typically curtains.
Exactly. And I go back and forth because I was told that the Brazilians pronounce his name as Harjefe, like jefe as in boss. But then you have people like Butters who doesn't get the E right all the time. And he's like Harjefe instead of Harjefe. So, and then of course we have the Harjef, which we always say. So I apologize to everyone if it irritates you that I'm switching back and forth, but it's an old habit. Game two, Harjeff goes back to the Galarian Corsola, this time into Gastrodon lead. This one was actually a very close game. In both games one and two, I noticed that Spartan shielded the first charge type before he fired Rock Tomb from his Cradily onto the fortress, but it ended up with Lantern water gunning down his fortress all the same. And then game three, this one was hairy. This one was literally Galarian Moltres lead from Harjeff into Dedenne. And somehow Harjeff brought it back.
Yeah, so let me remember that one. I feel as if like it ended up being a Credilli in the bag for Rajef, which then just had tremendous core breaking potential into Spartan's Dedenne and Gastrodon.
Yeah.
So yeah, as soon as the fortress was out of the picture, which I think was it the Scissor or the Lantern that raided out the fortress? I have forgotten to
So
take notes, but
no, it's okay. I've got some play by play for us. So obviously, disastrous lead for Harjef. Harjef safe swaps to Scizor immediately, and what's happens here is really curious because Spartan decides to stay in with the Dedenne long enough to fire the parabolic charge, and then switch to Fortress. So he does take the shield, but in the process, he ends up giving 5 bullet punches of energy over to Scizor. So normally in even shield, even energy, Fortress has a good shot at taking down the Scizor, especially if you can trigger a debuff here or there. But because Scizor was already at 5 bullet punches, it was really far ahead. And then the nail in the coffin for that switch control matchup between the bug steals was that Harjef got the Night Slash boost on the first attempt. So
oh
I actually
yes.
went back and looked at the Sims and I was like, oh, did the Night Slash boost change this matchup? Is that why he won it? And the answer was no. As soon as he got the 5 bullet punches, Spartan had no way to win even shields with the Fortress versus the Scizor. It just wasn't going to happen. But the Night Slash boost kind of reinforced the fact that Harjef was going to take switch. And to your point, after Harjefe was able to bring down the Fortress with his Scizor, he let the Scizor go. But at that point, he had his Cradilli versus the opposing Dedenne, and then his Galarian Moltres versus Spartan's last Pokemon, which is Gastrodon. So that was really a story of the mid matches. And you could argue that Spartan could have instant switched into his Fortress versus the Scizor, but his team really lacked a strong answer to Scizor, and I think that was his undoing.
Yeah, I think it was also just like maybe a risk that felt worth taking, but at the end of the day, a risk that didn't pay off. That
Yeah.
Spartan just went ABA weak to the Credilli on Roger's side, which again, like it's a risky bring into the comp with the Fortress, but if you don't get it lined up against the Fortress, it can just you can get so much mileage out of the Credilli, and yeah, Raja
Mhm.
managed to to do just that. And I guess the boost was just the icing on the cake.
Yeah. It was really funny as well listening to Rise live stream these battles because he wasn't exactly commentating, but he would offer like popcorn comments, right? He'd be like, "Oh, this looks really tough for Harjeff," or "Spartan's in trouble here. Uh oh,"
yeah,
in the typical the typical
yeah,
Rise.
yeah. I hear it in Rise's voice in my head.
Yeah. Oh, he's a great guy. I'm so glad he streamed those matches, and I'm so glad as well that Machete streamed their version and that Mish was able to record it. So again, we want full streams for these tournaments. These players deserve it. They've got insane attendance and insane talent. I hope we get that. But for now, everyone, you'll have to settle for the Show 6 podcast and the monologue that was the bracket breakdown and some of our recap on the grand finals. But Hart Jeff is able to win this event overall. He wins the first event of the season. And what's also interesting is that we got to see our two LATAM kings, right? Our two crown bearers here in the winners semifinals when Harjef took on Marto. And Harjef ended up winning that series 3-1. Marto falling to that losers side bracket. So
Yeah,
that was
it
really
was even the
exciting.
winners finals, and then in the losers finals, Spartan
You're
got
right.
Marto, and that's how that went down. But yeah, like
You're right.
if your winners finals is Rajef versus Marto, like those two are up there for a reason for sure. Like classic Brazil versus Argentina clash, and this
It
time
was
Brazil came out on top, and that appears to be a theme for the start of the season.
it was so funny too because in Rise's stream, he literally has the phone and he kind of angles it over towards where Marto and Harjef are playing. And it's just two guys sitting at a table, like any other table for any other pairing,
Yeah,
because there's
yeah,
no
those guys
stage.
deserve a stage. They deserve a
Yes,
stage.
yes, my thoughts precisely. They deserve it. So Spartan almost able to defend Mexico, but does fall to Harjef 3-0 in the grand finals. But you got to love all the effort that the 7-Eleven team and the LNDs Tuzzy team have put into this. So very exciting to see. All right, my friend. I'm not sure if there's anything else we want to add of Monterey, or if we want to get into Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think we should move on to the first North American regional of the season. We still don't know the first North American grand finalist of the season, but everything else we have already seen and will be able to comment on.
Very, very funny. Very funny. All right. So going into this event, I wanted to ask you a couple questions about um, not player related stuff. I wanted to know what you thought about the casting pairings. We had DeFi and Homesize Henry, and we had myself and Butters. And I'll give you the first half of it. Um, Henry is incredibly talented. I think he is a gifted orator. Whenever you hear him describe certain things, he uses such incredibly colorful language that I want to incorporate into my commentary as well. For example, there's like a Shadow Charizard lead into a steel type at one point, and he said, "This is an explosive lead." I was like, "Man, that is such a cool word, a cool phrase to use." And DeFi, I felt like had one of her best casts of her entire career. I mean, she absolutely popped off, and I could tell she was having so much fun with Henry. And it's great as well to kind of get her play-by-play, her hype, her excitement, and then have Henry just pick the ball up and run with it in terms of analysis, in terms of matchups, shielding scenarios, and also DeFi kept on calling out the counts for the moves. You know, oh, it's 5 pecks to the foul play, or it's 7 acids to the rock tomb. That was very, very helpful, I think, for new players. And then, dude, I just heckin' love working with Butters. I don't know if you could tell, but we were shouting our lungs out in that cast, and hopefully we didn't overdo it. We had a lot of fun.
You guys had fun, and honestly, like to your point, I had people like talk to me about the cast after the weekend, and multiple people were pointing out that DeFi had a great performance. And overall, I just like the idea that with how like we've been at this for a couple of years, right? But for the most part, the casting, like the caster pairings, haven't actually switched all that much. Like you always had like you had Butters and Caleb, you had
Yeah.
DeFi and Alpha Phoebe, and obviously there's like dynamics that are established and that are beloved by the audience. But I like the idea of getting people out of their comfort zone a little more so they maybe can showcase other aspects of their casting talent next to a person that may have a different style of their own. And honestly, like Pittsburgh was just something that worked really, really well for me. Doesn't mean that it has to be repeated that exact same way every
Yeah.
single time. Um, but yeah, I thought that the audience response to the cast was fantastic. And even though I was rather busy during that weekend,
Yeah.
from what I've been able to listen back to, I can only echo that sentiment. So yeah, I really enjoyed the casting. I enjoyed the very silly segments that you set up for in between the battles. Like, I don't know how you come up with it, but it's the exact right flavor of goofy. So I do appreciate that. And yeah, I thought there were some great interviews with the players after their matches too. I feel
Yeah.
as if there are some regionals where, like occasionally it feels a little rushed. I feel like that's more so the case if there's like
Mm.
technical issues and you're running behind. But yeah, there was like a decent amount of space, that the competitors could fill out by having those moments where they could just like talk to the camera, talk to the audience, and you
Mhm.
always get so much personality from the competitors. And yeah, it was overall just a very successful start to um like this season of competitive play Pokemon for sure.
So I will tell you this: I pitched 10 different segments to Pokemon, and five of them
Where does he
got
get them
through.
from? Where does he
Five,
get them from?
five of them got through, which I'm very, very happy with the ones that did. Whether it was the Mega Malamar Mega Prediction segment with Adib and Dunebug, or if it was the Pexperts with you, Mish, and Anna, or if it was Mason's Pittsburgh slang, or even our Steelix draft that we did, which was really cool. But there was one. I'll tell you. I'll leak one. I'll leak one that didn't quite make it. So Hunchcrow is known as the boss bird, right? And Murkrow just had a big impact in Monterrey. We just spent like 20 minutes talking about it. So I had one segment idea where I was going to wear a blue fedora and a white scarf, and I was going to be the boss crow, and I would have three of my mer crows in the lounge, and I would say, kind of like in mob boss traditional fashion, I would just tell them to do things that were uncomfortable, but they had to do it because I was the boss. And
Oh
like
god.
and like one of the quotes was or one of the questions was, say something nice about Bastion, or you lose a game and someone tags you and says GG's, say something kind back to them. And it's just going to be wildly
Okay,
uncomfortable.
those are fun challenges. Actually, I would have liked to see
Yes.
that.
Yeah, so that was one I was cooking. I'll leak one more. So what's his name? Mr. Rogers was actually from Pittsburgh, and he always opens the show where he's tying his shoes and he's got his sweater and his tie and he's like so professional. This one was a little bit too corny, but I thought about it. I thought about dressing up like Mr. Rogers and tying my shoe in the middle of the crowd with all the craziness happening around, and saying, "Will you raid with me, neighbor?" And walking up to someone and joining into a raid with them, reviewing their raid team, and actually like trying to be really nice about offering suggestions and that kind of stuff. So I had ideas. I had ideas.
Uh,
There was an Andy Warhol idea as well that didn't make the cut. So
uh,
yeah.
this man is
Anyway,
just an endless well of creativity. But that was Pokemon being played also. That's true.
like you said, like it's the right mix of cheese. I hope so. Anyway, over to the actual Pokemon and the meta and the predictions. I just want to call this out, TZ. I predicted both Corviknight and Bastion in my caster predictions, and I feel like I mainlined the universe. All right, I knew exactly what was coming, but not everyone shared my sentiment. So let's look at some of the more common themes, the more overlapping themes that we've seen at this tournament. I do think that Murkrow's success in Monterrey did influence a lot of trainers. We saw Dunebug, Ashanash, as well as Semi all playing Murkrow. Semi, the latter of the three, with Shadow Murkrow. We also had Galarian Moltres taking to the skies quite often. Cradily and Galarian Corsola were basically ubiquitous outside of a few other ghost type subs. Bug Steels, I think we had a bit more Fortress, and we had a bit more Tinkaton and Scizor in this tournament. We also had some surprises: Lantern on Trent's team, as well as Dugong, and then Arrow with the Guzzlord and Steel combination in his Shadow Steelix, which is really cool. What stands out to you? Does this feel like the proper like amalgamation of Frankfurt Monterrey, or is this its own unique creation?
So, like, one thing that stood out to me a little bit is that I think the trend is going towards Fortress rather than Scizor now. So in Frankfurt, I thought that Scizor was essentially just the bug steel type of choice, with the Bats team the only exception in top 16. But that team also had a Meowscarada, so maybe we shouldn't infer too much from that. But with how well Fortress did in Monterrey, a lot of people actually, like a lot of trainers, picked up on that. We
Hmm.
have four Fortress in top 16, but only two Shadow Scizor on the teams of Arrow and Out of Pocket. So yeah, a little bit of a change there. I think that the nice thing about Fortress, again, it's a Pokemon that you don't need to reserve shields for, so you can
Yeah.
feel free to bring something else on your line of six that you invest the shields in instead. For example, a Murkrow. Yeah, it's so interesting that we also did see the Shadow Murkrow. I personally always thought that, okay, this may be overkill because one thing that you don't want to happen to your Murkrow is you don't want it to get fast attack down.
Yeah.
Um, but then like let me put it this way. So I think the reason why Murkrow is good right now is because all the damage dealing fast attacks are resisted by it, or like most of the damage dealing fast attacks are resisted by it. You have Mud Slap,
Interesting.
double resisted. You have Astonish, resisted. You have Sucker Punch, resisted. So like a lot of the damage that is being put out immediately by Pokemon in the meta doesn't actually affect Murkrow all that much. But I think if you
Interesting.
are a Shadow, maybe even like acids from Credilli start adding up, bug bites from Fortress start adding up. And that way, I think you may run into trouble as the Shadow Murkrow more quickly than you would do as the regular. But again, like still great performance by Sammy, who didn't go for the Fortress as the sole Murkrow user who didn't go for that pairing. Instead, had a team that was fairly soft to Credilli, but I guess if you are the Shadow Murkrow, a drill pack probably still chunks Credilli, plus you outpace, so
Yeah.
maybe you can just play that neutrally really, really well. So yeah, that was like an observation that I had regarding the Murkrows. And yeah, other than that, I feel as if the teams that like first of all, there was a an update to the 7-Eleven team in that Dedenne, which was everywhere in Monterrey, was now nowhere in Pittsburgh.
Hmm.
Um, so instead, we saw Unova Stunfisk fill out that role as a little bit of a more flexible electric type, maybe. Um, Also, one that can play better into the Shadow Scizor. We just talked about how Shadow Scizor was a real problem for that team in the grand finals, but now you have an electric type that actually resists the bullet punches rather than taking neutral from them. So that was certainly a consideration that played a role in that adjustment. But yeah, I feel as if new ideas are still emerging, with the top two teams being a Bastiodon Shadow Annihilate team and a Corviknight Guzzlord team. So yeah, there's certainly developments that haven't been seen yet at either of the previous regionals, in part informed by the fact that Aircutter Corviknight was not legal in either Monterrey or Frankfurt and only became available in this new Aircutter Community Day version for the Pittsburgh regional.
I need to apologize to you, ZZ. I've been trying to put it in the back of my mind, but I just have to say it. I think we talked about this in our meta preview, and I definitely told some friends this over the past weekend. I kept saying the same thing. I said Corviknight is going to top cut, but I don't think it's going to win. And I was more correct than I
Ah.
intended to be. And if I put that bad juju on you, I take full fault for it.
uh,
But yeah, you mentioned Air Cutter Corvin. I think a couple times we might have confused the viewers on stream because we would just say this Pokemon has not been eligible until now, but it has, of course. We saw Nickname win last season with it. Air Cutter was not eligible, and I'm really glad you made that distinction. So I think it's important for people to know, especially if you're new to competitive Pokemon Go. There is that 2-week wait period after the Tuesday of release. So again, Air Cutter Corviknight not eligible in Monterrey and Frankfurt. Would it have made a difference there? Hard to say, but it definitely had its moment in Pittsburgh. So I agree with you. A lot of the things kind of stayed the same. You did see that interesting support for Murkrow kind of being built into that 7-Eleven team structure. Whenever I see Ashton Ash's team, I just assume this is an Eomero creation, or at least, 80-20 Eomero contribution. But I'm noticing as well, as I look at this bracket again, a lot of electric types kind of rising up here. Lantern on Trent's team, Charge Bug for Out of Pocket. Then you've got the 2 Stunfisk in third and fourth place, your own Charge Bug. And then Steinar kind of proves that there are other ways to get the same job done. He actually went with Double Rock. And this is something I was thinking about on the drive in. How can you stop Double Rock unless you decide to bring something like a counter user? Because when you do have the Cradilly and you do have the Bastiodon, it just feels like that's so much to work through. And the Cradilly covers that ground type weakness with its grass typing. So I don't know. It feels difficult. I don't think Primate could beat Double Rock. It doesn't have the bulk to do it. I think that the only option is Annihilate, but
yeah,
I'm not sure how you feel about that.
I don't know. Like it depends. Obviously, like it's not just double rock, right? It's also the things that protect the two rock types.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like obviously, like one fighting type is going to play really, really well into rock types. Like rock is not a great defensive typing. I feel like its strength, like Bastiodon's strength, lies in its steel resistances and in its stat product, whereas Credilli's strengths lie in its grass rock coverage, which is just like one man grasshole, as we alluded to previously, where you can really core break those ground flying cores really well. And then obviously Rock Tomb just being a really good attack, Smackdown being buffed. Defensively, I think rocks are vulnerable, but they're probably not really targeted as much. Like at least Bastiodon isn't. Um, maybe like people are targeting um the Credilli in all sorts of different ways, like with the Fortress, for example, or with the Shadow Scizor, or even with the Golisopod. But those Pokemon have playable, okay-ish matchups into Bastiodon at best, so that doesn't actually work all that well. And
Mhm.
also, there were like how many other fighting types did we see in Top Cut? I see one Shadow Primeape on the team of GCB, and I also
That's
see
it.
the Annihilate, the Shadow Annihilate on Caleb's team.
Hmm.
Um, but other than that, they're pretty much missing in action. So it was a really good meta call to bring those Pokemon together. Also having some fighting coverage in Corsola, in Shadow Annihilate on that team. So overall, just like a really balanced team with Bastiodon just being able to dominate neutrals. One Pokemon that I had in mind that I wish I had in Pittsburgh was
Yeah.
actually Clodsire, because
Oh,
Clodsire,
yeah.
obviously, it fears the Gastrodon, but you can ensure yourself against Gastrodon in so many ways, whether you have your own Critterly, which then puts out grass type damage, whether you have flying types such as Corviknight, whether you just have neutrally winning matchups such as with Galarian Corsola. Like there's ways of combating Gastrodon and keeping a Clodsire safe. But if you look at it, it's one of the few things that has a neutral winning matchup against Credilli. It has a solid enough matchup against picks such as Galarian Moltres, Annihilate, or Corsola,
Yeah.
and it's one of the hardest to answer to Bastiodon. So there would be like 4 to 5 good to playable matchups for a Clodsire on that winning team. But the only Clodsire that made it to Top Cut was on Silent Beast's team, and I don't believe Silent Beast got to fight LNDsTSteinar. So yeah, dodged that bullet, but makes a lot of sense because Clodsire was like capping out at like 10-ish% usage, so
Yeah.
not the most common Pokemon in the tournament.
So I'm really glad you brought up Silent Beast team. I just want your knee jerk reaction, your authentic reaction here. What do you think of Silent Beast team? So the full scope here is Gastrodon, Shadow Charizard, Furret, as well as Gudra, Clodsire, and Galarian Corsola. I know that with your specific play style, this might not be the perfect fit for you, but do you feel like this is a strong six?
I like this team. I like a bunch of Pokemon individually. Like I've been bringing a lot of Galarian Corsola. It's been a little more targeted recently, but I still believe that it's like it's not that bold of a call to say that it's the best ghost type right now. Gudra has a lot of flexibility. Furret has a lot of flexibility. You know that Furret, Gudra, and Shadow Charizard also core really well. Then you have another core in the Gastrodon with the Charizard, just like classic ground flying. There's a lot of stuff that really works, like syncs well together. One thing that I don't like about this team is that 3 of the Pokemon are terrible into Galarian Moltres, and the other 3 are
Ah,
like neutral to playable. Um, so again, that's
good point.
a moment where I would say, okay, I guess like I know that my Pokemon that my opponent is going to bring out this Pokemon every single time. So I just play Gudra Clodsire Core and I'm probably alright, kind of alright-ish. But it's still a risk to take because you become very predictable for your opponent. So like just imagine you go up against somebody who has both the
With
Galarian
ice?
Moltres and like an Ice type. Then your 2 best answers are also like if it's like a Dugong, for example, that doesn't even do terribly into
Oh,
Shadow Charizard. Like, how do you really combat that without having to play RPS?
yeah.
So yeah, I like Silent Beast's team building in general. We talked briefly in Pittsburgh, and I was telling him how I remember like a deep run that he did last season, and how he like played a Shadow Machamp in practice, then went for a Shadow Primeape in the real tournament and did super well. So
Yeah.
tends to prefer those maybe not super bulky but flexible Pokemon, and had a really good showing again. But yeah, I'm always scared of Moltres, so I can't really co-sign that Pokemon. And yeah, I
That's
guess
fair.
we'll get into being scared of Moltres later on as well when we talk about the grand finals.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I really appreciate that insight, and I feel like a lot of players who are listening to the show and maybe are like frustrated with their own team building, I think it's good for them to hear, your perspective, and occasionally, maybe every so often, my perspective on team building. But I want to do a quick bracket breakdown here for Pitt before we get into our top cut and then our grand finals. We had some really fascinating groups, and I just want to dedicate a little bit of time to talking about each of them. Group B in particular, I need to hear your thoughts on. So, Group A, Jason 2890 competed in Pittsburgh. I was really excited to see him playing because he is a Go Battle League titan, one of the best, if not the best, to ever do it in Go Battle League. And he's always so well spoken. That was one of my interviews, was Jason talking about his GBL success. The bad news for Jason is that he won one round before he faced off against Harjef, and he lost to Harjef in round two. He won two more rounds in the losers bracket until Harjef found him again for the second time and knocked him out of the tournament. So Jason was only
I
defeated by.
wonder I wonder whether Jason will ever be seeded once they add championship points to GBL, because
Good
he
question.
may just accidentally qualify for Worlds based on that alone.
No, seriously. I think if anyone has a shot to do it, it's him. And Jason, being such an impressive player, it's crazy that he only lost to one person all weekend, and he lost to that person twice. And unfortunately, that ended his tournament run. So Jason was my shout out for Group A. I actually wrote these notes on the plane, so I'll just read these off. Group B, I called this the homie group because there were so many homies here. ZZ versus Mish in round three, which was on stream. A little friendly fire there between the two of you. We talked about that in the interview. H Shira was also in this group. She took down Adib in round three and then disposed of Magic Mason in round four. So she was really, really good. Um, then we had Mish with a deep losers bracket run until she met Lil Winery in round six, who took down
Yes.
Mish. So,
We like to at my team of Sharks and Recreation, we like to call that shark on shark violence. It happens
uh,
far too often, but it was still a fantastic run by both of them, earning 160 championship points each. So yeah, we're hoping to get a good amount of Sharks qualified for Worlds next year again. So that was a pretty decent start to that mission. One thing that I did want to point out about Group A, it was also a group where three high profile trainers brought a Barcelona in
oh,
Jason, in Rajef, and in Caleb. So that was essentially where I thought they kept all the Basties, but there was one more in the tournament, as it turns out.
yeah, right. Three-quarters of the Bastions were contained to Group A, and guaranteed basically to cannibalize each other. So yeah, that what an unfortunate turn of events. But yeah, the Group B was also very unfortunate to me because I kept on seeing the names. I was like, oh my god, it's
Mhm.
like the Mister Incredibles meme where it's like those who know and those who don't know. It's like, oh, we're in the same group, and he's so happy.
Yeah.
It's like those who know we're in the same group, and then it's just
Uh,
the blacked out like dread that we're gonna have to battle each other at some point. So that was really really funny. Group C, Lil Sparty had a really nice run. I wanted to point this out. Lil Sparty brought down Valor, Ash, and Phoebe before losing 0-2 to Dune, who was our third place finisher. This was also very cool in terms of Go Battle League because No Trouble Clef and N Lucio. So our first ever GBLA champion all those years back, taking on N Lucio, one of my favorite players in that bracket. It looks like they both fell down to the losers bracket where they faced each other. Believe it or not, No Trouble took on N Lucio, and Lucio won that 2-0. I believe No Trouble went 0-2 in the tournament, which is unfortunate, but I do look for him to come back and compete some more.
but yeah, like
Uh,
that's one of the groups where we say like, oh, Europe is so stacked and like they have so much depth of talent. I feel like that group was also in that vein. Like that is just like a crazy amount of very high profile unseededs.
exactly. And again, double elimination is not the most forgiving, but maybe one day we'll have Swiss. Group D, Silent Beast. This is a shocking run to me because Silent Beast ended up making day 2. We were talking about his team earlier. He actually lost round 2 to Spellbringer, who I had a few minutes to catch up with on Friday when I was watching everyone battle out in the challenge. Spellbringer is a really nice guy. He lost round 2 to Spellbringer, but powered his way through that loser side bracket to make top cut, even winning a rematch versus Spellbringer in round 5. So Silent Beast really turned it on after that. Group E was Steinar's bracket. We know how that went. He was able to win that winner's side of that. And then Frankie T52, one of my buddies from Orlando, he was knocked out of round 6. If he would have won round 6 and round 7, he would have made it to day 2 on the loser side bracket. So I hope Frankie is proud of the run he had there. Group F, just briefly, the Tarian versus Hungry Wolfpack was the losers finals, where Wolfpack won 2-0. Group G was stacked. All right, this was an insane group. We had Stud Muffins, Rockhaven, Eomero, Trent, and Phoenix Stark. Trent won the winner's side, and then Phoenix Stark defeated Eomero in the loser's side to advance from day 2 from Group G. So we talked about the earlier group with the GBL legends in it being good, but Group G was also insane. And finally, the last group I wanted to mention was Group H. BJ Pawat takes down Septile Ice, who is Homesize Henry's #1 fan, in round 2. Enhoff defeated LNDsKanan in round 3, and then Kanan was eliminated by Septile. And then Phoenix the Boss versus Enhoff in the losers finals, which Anna won 2-0.
It's such a crazy losers round 3 if you have LNDsKanan versus Zzweilous.
Right?
How is this? Like, that could be like a top 4 matchup easily.
Yeah, exactly. Totally insane. But that's my bracket breakdown.
Yes.
Yeah, break it down bracket of Pittsburgh. So
I think one thing, like, now that we went through all the groups individually, one thing that I want to call out specifically is how great of a showing the women of this community had this weekend, because not only had they not only did they have plenty of streamed appearances, but we also had, I think for the first time since Baltimore last year when Kelsey K and Lil Winery made top cut, we had 2 women in top 16 with Enhoff and H. Shira. And I also think that we had like 5 women in top 25 or 32. So certainly something to be proud of for everyone involved.
I really thought it was amazing when we had 2 women battling on stage and the judge was Allie T. I was like, this is insane. This is so cool. But yeah, no, I thought that was incredible.
They like eventually called over Susie for like a dispute situation. So
that was awesome. Obviously, we don't cover too many political things on the show, and I don't want to linger on this too long. But given recent news in the VG area, which is very, very, very sad, it feels good that we have women trainers in Go that are competing, are active, and hopefully in every single moment that they're at the regional championships, they feel safe and welcomed. So seeing them on stage is one thing, and I'm really, really glad that they're able to do that time and time again. I agree with you. I thought this was an incredible showcase of women trainers, and I shouted out Lil Sparty as well and her bracket run. Lil Winery, all the Lils had really good runs, taking down big names, and Mish as well. I mean, Mish was awesome, and I hope she's really proud of what she had to. Of what she accomplished. She had to run up against some guy from Germany in round 3. Talk about an unfair draw.
It was like a really tough bracket, like with Magic Mason coming off like a crazy world's placement too. So yeah, definitely a very strong showing, and proud of my teammates making it this far.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Zz, if there's nothing else we want to mention about the overall top cut and the team compositions, I think we can go to the dreaded grand finals. What do you say?
Jesus. Yeah, let's jump in. I don't even have notes, but I will answer all of your questions that you may have.
Okay, so sorry, I need to take one step back. When you reverse swept Steinar the first time, after going down 0-2, you won 3 in a row. That was one of the coolest moments I've seen in Championship Series history. I'm a little biased, right? But that was super sick. When you popped off at the end, you kind of brought your fist in and you shouted something. And it looked like some of those words started with F. I just want to know what was said when you had your pop off, and if you can say it on the broadcast.
I will be totally honest. I have no idea what I said in that moment.
What?
Like I have no recollection. It was just like a reaction, right? Like I don't think I thought of anything in particular. I was just like
Wow.
so relieved to like the switch clock came up like one acid before the move was thrown, and I decided that because he had the knowledge of winning CMP, he would try to do it again,
Yep.
and that's why I swapped it at the time when I swapped. And then I just hoped that he would not get the perfect undercharge, which I know would be super, super difficult because you
Mhm.
need to calculate how you acid down a Corviknight, which like how would you
Yeah.
know the
What?
damage ranges for that exactly? So I was hopeful that I had it at that moment, and when I saw the amount of undercharge, I knew I would get to an air cutter before getting thumped down. So
Mhm.
um, but yeah, that
Well,
was that was a really good moment. That was the first time I entered the grand finals from the winner's side, by the way. Not that it helped me.
oh, interesting. I actually didn't know that. I'll insert the clip of the stream where you have your pop off. Maybe we can get some bad lip readings going, and people that watch
Oh
it can commentate what they think you're
jeez.
saying. Um, but yeah, it looks something akin to "Let's effing go" or "That's what I'm effing talking about." Is kind of what I took from it.
That
But
that may be close to what was said in that moment, but like I couldn't tell you for sure.
yeah, I absolutely loved it. It was. I think that's the most like how do I phrase it? Not angry or aggressive, but that's like the most competitive
Emotional?
energy. No, not even emotional, because I've seen you be very grateful on stage. I've seen you be very humble. I've seen you, express those emotions. This was more like towards the fiery side. That was the most fire I think I've seen come out of you on stage, which I think was really really fun, because you're always so well composed and well put together, right? You keep to yourself and you're very disciplined, but seeing you actually like pop off, I was like, hell yeah, ZZ, I'm feeling this. This is insane. I haven't seen this side, but I like it, right? So that was the good news. That was the probably the peak point for you in this tournament, because as we've alluded to, if you didn't watch the stream, ZZ did face Steinar again, this time in the grand finals. Steinar fell down to the loser side bracket, ended up beating Dunebug, made it back up to that grand final stage. Um, and things did not go as well as they did for you in your first meeting. So, game one, this is actually a really famous, in my mind, this is already a famous game because you lead Chargebug into Bastiodon. Your full team is Chargebug, Cradilly, Corviknight, Steinar with Gastrodon, or excuse me, Steinar with Bastiodon, Galarian Corsola, and Cradilly. What shocked me is that you stayed in for the 4 volt switches and then went to Cradilly. It almost felt like you were refusing to play the alignment game and you were not going to make the instant swap and you did not want to leave empty handed. And having that energy on the charge bug is what eventually saved you in that game number one.
So a lot of people asked me whether like why I was leading Chargerbug so much. And there's two reasons for that. So the very first reason was that there could never be a Bastiodon lead with an Annihilate in the back. And
Ooh.
that's because that would be an unnecessary risk for Steiner to take, because I would have a positive matchup with my standard tech Corviknight in the front if he did that. And then if he had an Annihilate also, then that would just be threatened by my energy from the Corviknight. So um, if he safe swapped the Annihilate in that situation, like first of all, he could get met with the Galarian Corsola, which would then just be game over for him, so he would probably never do that. But also, I could just chip and dip with an air cutter, so that's another reason for him to never do that. If he kept the Annihilate in the back in a scenario like that, I would not even need swap to then have a Pokemon that probably was good into both options in the back. And even though like Annihilate can make that really competitive while shields are up, um, like against every other Pokemon, I get energy for relatively cheap with the Corviknight. So just like the energy advantage that I would have had in an endgame scenario like that, it made me really, really confident that behind a Bastiodon there could never be an Annihilate. So what I was thinking then was, okay, his second most likely Pokemon to come other than Bastiodon, in my eyes, was Galarian Moltres. I was very surprised to
Mm,
not see that much Galarian Moltres at all in my very first best of five against Steinar.
yeah.
And maybe it was because I played so much Charjabug Credilli Core. But yeah, I tried to really protect myself from that Galarian Moltres. Um, because that thing not only would have been a hard counter to Gastrodon, which was my like most obvious Bastia answer,
Yeah.
but it also would have entirely shut down Corviknight because it was on payback and not on Bravebird. Corviknight has a playable one shield matchup against Galarian Moltres if it was on double flying movesets. But like that, I can't really do anything. That's just really, really miserable for the Corviknight. So yeah, I was trying to really ensure myself against the Galarian Moltres, which I was thinking would come every game. So if I had like
Mm,
one good thing in the back and one good thing in the front, I was very likely to have positive alignment against Galarian Moltres. And then I also knew that if I um build up energy with Charger Bug, then swapped in the Credilli to tank the Bastiodon's Charge Attack energy, he would be hard pressed to really counter that Credilli super well because of the fact that it was so unlikely for him to have the Annihilate ready for that situation. So he could
mm,
maybe stay in with the Basti against the Credilli and win the matchup that way. That would um, misalign switch clocks. It would mean that I had two moves on the Charger Bug to sweep the late game. Or he could swap out and bring in another answer. But if he was to swap out into his Credilli, then I would be ahead on energy even by just one acid, and I would still be above half health if I only took that Stone Edge, and I would be able to potentially force alignment and then get my loaded charger on whatever he had in the back, while getting my Corviknight in the back onto his Spasti and then sand attacking that a lot. So I had like multiple ideas of how I would arrive at victory, even if I led the charger into Basti. A mistake that I think I made in some of those matches where that was my initial position was that I swapped into the Credilli too early. I think I should have always done 5 volt switches and loaded up to double charge attacks before dipping into the Credilli, because that way Steiner would have had to, or would have been likely to immediately throw the Stone Edge and leave me like significantly above half health. There was at least one game, maybe two, where I only did 4 volt switches. He
mm.
got more um, smackdowns in on my Credilli, and those smackdowns doing more than acids, I presume,
Yeah.
then made it so that my Credilli was actually getting farmed down by his Credilli. So that was a lack of commitment on my end to the farm up with the Charger Bug. And that was informed by a mishap that happened to me in game one of Winners Finals, where I tried to not let him catch my Charger Bug energy on the Bastiodon, while I managed to kind of turn the tables a little bit and had the charger against Moltres because I already flipped the alignment the way I laid it out. But I overtapped on my world switch, took one too many smackdowns once the Basti came in after a short turn wait by him. And then in the end game, I didn't have enough health on my charger bug to take out the Moltres. So that made me think that, oh, like maybe if I swap earlier, I may not have enough.
Maintain some
I may
health.
not have the exact same amount of energy on my charger bug, but I would have had more health if I had to take like a smackdown in the late game again. Um, but yeah, I needed to be very, very precise in all of those games. And there were at least 3 or 4 where I wasn't precise enough. So I couldn't really fight back from the positions I found myself in.
Looking at the teams, first of all, I think I just wanted to circle back to the very first point you made and just remind everyone like how valuable that insight was. Like we talk a lot about which individual Pokemon are good or which archetypes are strong or which, duos or even trios are powerful. But your ability to say, if I'm going to see Bastiodon, I won't see Annihilate on the same team. That process of elimination is something that I feel like we don't spend enough time, we don't dedicate enough energy to actually explaining. And that's actually such a valuable point. I really hope everyone is enjoying this episode. It feels like a very, very good one. Um, but I wanted to circle back to the issue that you were having with the Glaring Moltres. Your Guzzlord was running Brutal Swing and Sledge Bomb. I know there's some Guzzlords that are still running Dragon Claw. I'm not exactly sure what Arrow was running. He might have been running the same moveset as you. I believe he was. But the Guzzlord seems like the most obvious answer, neutrally speaking, to that Galarian Moltres. Outside of like the Charge Bug, the super effective damage, whatever. The Guzzlord seemed like the good answer. But the amount of stress that Steinar's team exerted on your comps is it really can't be understated, because sure, you can have the Guzzlord versus the Gastrodon. That's like very neutral. It's very close, extremely competitive, could go either way. You have your Guzzlord versus the Cradily, which is, competitive still. You have your Guzzlord versus the Galarian Corsola, which is probably the most dominant matchup you had. But then you had two abysmal matchups, being the Shadow Annihilate and the Bastiodon. So the two Pokemon we began this whole point talking about were very difficult for your Guzzlord to actually take. And you did actually bring your Guzzlord to at least a couple games, I believe. And it did well for you, but you could tell the swing in momentum as soon as the Bastiodon came back out and Guzzlord had to try to do something against it. It was really, really tough to get past. So game one, you executed beautifully in the grand finals. I believe your Charge Bug survives with just like 1 HP. Steinar switches in the Bastiodon and throws the Smackdown, and a less prepared trainer would have gone for a Volt Switch, taken the extra damage, and lost the game. But with your control, you were able to throw the discharge into the Bastiodon, withstand the acids to get to a X-Scissor versus the Cradily, and win that game number one. And you were all smiles after that. That was really fun, because you recognized that you had it, and Butters and I were losing our collective minds at how good that series was to start. Game number two, this is going to be so interesting, because games 1 and 2, Steinar played Bastiodon, Galarian Corsola, Cradily. And then games 3 and 4, he does what you were concerned about. He plays a Galarian Moltres. He swaps out his one Galar Pokemon for another, bringing the bird. So I'm not sure if there's anything you really wanted to say about game number 2, but I do think that the adjustments in game number 3 and game number 4 made your pivot over to Gastrodon in the reset even more ambitious, because you had seen ABB strong to Gastrodon in the Galarian Moltres and the Cradily combo. So in that first grand final set, can you just walk us through your mindset, how things were going, and what wasn't working through those next 3 games?
Okay, so I think where it all fell apart was I was in a winning position in one of the games. I don't remember whether it was game 2 or game 3, but there was like a situation where I had a lot of energy on my Corviknight, and Steiner had a Corsola that was in payback range and a Bastiodon that was almost knocked out.
Game 2.
And mhm. And I was like, okay, you just wait until the Astonish comes through and then you throw the payback. And then I waited for a turn, and then I didn't trust the game, because what had happened in the winners finals is that I got some late visual updates, and that was really annoying to me. So I just waited a turn rather than actually waiting for the animation to come through. And I was so afraid that he was just like farming me down as we were speaking. Um, so I just waited a turn and threw anyway, because I just didn't have the confidence that what was happening on screen was actually what was happening. And he managed to just also wait a turn and then catch on the Bastion. I couldn't undercharge it enough to farm down to another payback.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of 2-0 with like 3 games to win it all of a sudden I'm 1-1. And then, like, I don't know whether it was game 3 or 4, but eventually he figures out that, oh, he's relying on Corviknight as his Bastiodon answer. If I just bring Galarian Moltres, there's not really anything he can do. And once Steiner found out that Moltres is actually his like second best Pokemon, it was essentially over for me, because like Basti in the lead, Moltres in the back, that's just something that I can barely answer properly if I don't call the line perfectly and have like Gastro, then I chip the safe swap, and then I keep alignment, and then I have like what is even my I guess like mm, he doesn't have payback, so maybe Charger is fine there. But yeah, it would have always been really really tough for me. As soon as he figured out that Moltres was so strong for him. So yeah,
Yeah.
like it was essentially like uphill from the moment he found that out. But yeah, I threw away the tournament the moment I let him catch. And yeah, I wish I just like I consciously thought to myself, oh, you just wait for the astonish and you have this game. And I didn't wait for the astonish, and yeah, I was conditioned to the game not working, so
Hey,
it's like a little tough.
I I can relate to that in terms of Go Battle League. I actually I sent in a bug report to Niantic. This was a few weeks back. But I sent in a bug report because I was in a similar situation as you, where I was waiting for the moves to come through so that I could decide when to throw. But because of a the fear of a visual bug, I just went ahead and YOLO'd and threw anyway, and ended up losing the game. And this was like, I know this is something that a lot of PvPers have struggled with over the past few seasons, but I was sitting, on the couch playing a game and this happened. And the rage that filled my body when that happened to me, I was so tilted off the earth. I can only imagine how you must have been feeling up on stage with all this on the line, all this at stake. And that one moment, because that's really all you have, is one moment to either second guess the game or to go all in, and it's
I
so
would have had
risky.
3 match points, and
Yes. You would have, yeah, more chances to just seal it and put it away. This is Remember everyone, this is the same thing that happened to Arrow when he was competing at Worlds. I believe it was two steel types on the field, and Arrow was waiting for the timer, and the move came through from his opponent. It's escaping me right now who he was playing, but the move came through from his opponent. He came in with the Steelix, but he was like a turn behind or something like that, and he missed out on the game-winning charge attack. So that's a major issue that I really hope gets fixed, patched, updated, however you want to say it, with competitive Pokemon, because tapping, giving the input to the screen should not be the only way that you can see what's happening, because that's just, come on. Waiting a turn is a huge part of skill expression. Massive, massive part. The game two to me was the game of 1 HP survivals. This was Bastiodon surviving on 1 HP to get the Stone Edge versus your Guzzlord and take your final shield, which is really tough. But then Guzzlord turns around, survives on 1 HP to get the next Brutal Swing versus the Galarian Corsola, which made Steinar squirm in his seat. I could see he was very uncomfortable with that. But then, like you said, Steinar not force swapping allowed him to free up his timer. And then I have here Steinar catches Air Cutter on Basti and lands a Power Gem into Corviknight. But still, in the very last half second, this was a battle of Astonish versus Sand Attack, and Sand Attack just did not pull through and win you the game. Butters was even confused. Butters thought you won because he thought that the damage went through from the Sand Attack. But I had to explain to him. He was like, ZZ's up 2-0. And in an alternate timeline, you were. But at this point, it was tied 1-1. So, and then you're exactly right. Steiner realized that Bastion and Galarian Moltres was the duo. To be honest, he was probably expecting for you to lean more into the Gastrodon, and maybe he was thinking that just playing neutral was the right play. But once he realized that you were leaning on the Corviknight to help you bring down the Bastiodon, like you said, Galarian Moltres was just too good. And then game four, you threw a move, then swapped to Corviknight. Steiner immediately went Galarian Moltres into your Corviknight, and then Corviknight was one turn away from the payback at the very end, but it's unclear if you would have been able to beat the Galarian Moltres after that. So that was the grand finals, the first iteration. And I didn't mention this on the cast. I told Butters afterwards, but I watch everyone who plays. I noticed after that first grand final set that your body language changed. You folded your legs, you withdrew. I was looking at them like adjusting the phones, and you were like twisting your hands. I could see that there was like a sense of anxiety creeping in. So as a competitor in this grand finals reset situation, what was going through your mind? I mean, you just told me you felt like after game two it was over. Did you feel like you were running out of options?
I felt like after game two it wasn't over. It was over once he discovered the Moltres. I was
Ah,
like I was making this really competitive before he knew what his optimal strategy was. But it's the same way, like remember UIC Grand Finals. As long as Pato was bringing the Mandibus, ironically, just another more cope Dark Flyer. Like as long as that thing was on the field, I always had play. But as soon as he realized that, oh, my best Pokemon are actually different ones, um, it became uphill. Even though I don't want to equate the UIC finals to this one, because
Yeah.
even though both Pato and Steiner played fantastically in those finals, I think that against Pato, I still had an even team composition even after he dropped the Mandibus. Whereas against Steiner, I think I was just always going to be on the back foot because he had the neutral Credilli, which I decided to not hard cover on my team at all. I decided that I want to play neutrally into it, but you can't play neutrally into a Bastiodon team. So that's how he always had something safe to rely on, plus Pokemon that really threatening for me, whereas I didn't have that safe bit as much. So I thought that was like a playable but still a team comp disadvantage.
I
And
agree.
yeah, I knew that okay, my my set lead was gone after the bracket reset, and my opponent has figured out his optimal strategy. So I knew I needed to take risks now, and those risks unfortunately did not pay off.
Well, briefly, they did. In game one of the Grand Finals reset, the only note that I have here is ZZ embraces the RPS with like four exclamation marks. So, game four of the reset, you strike back, you lead Gastron into Bastiodon. The Dons are on the field, right? And then Steinar swaps Cradilly, you go Guzzlord. The final set is Chargebug versus Galarian Moltres. So you lined up everything here perfectly and really embraced the RPS. And this is something that I saw Steiner do earlier on in the tournament. He was not afraid at all to double down, even when things looked a little bit precarious. So in game number two, after you bounce back, you got a win under your belt. We have a series on our hands. Game two, he goes right back to the Bastiodon, just totally undeterred, just not flinching whatsoever. This time he leads into Cradilly. The only note I have for this one is that ZZ swaps the Galarian Corsola, and you get met by Galarian Moltres. So this is exactly lining up with what you were saying. Once he discovered the Basti Moltres combination, it was just really rough. Game three, Steiner goes a bit more neutral here, and I do respect him a lot for switching things up. He leads the Shadow Annihilate into your Corviknight, and already that probably tells you there's no Basti in the back. And you've got Cradily Chargebug, so there is some hope here, right? You throw Air Cutter, swap Chargebug to catch the Rage Fist, which I thought was really nifty, and then Steiner has a wacky, insane catch of Payback on his Corsola, and I think that catch right there sealed up game number three of the reset. So, game four of the reset, the final game of the series. This was a Guzzlord lead into Galarian Moltres, which is neutral, not definitive either way. Both the Dark types shield. ZZ shields the first fly, and then Steiner shields the first sludge bomb. Steiner swaps to Cradilly. You go Corviknight. Gastron versus Galarian Corsola is the end game, but Steinar reaches the final Rock Tomb to spear your Corviknight and win the series. So again, the last two
I
games he
was
banned the Bastiodon, but he brings that
yeah.
Galarian
I
Moltres.
was very surprised that he leaned on the Galarian Corsola so much.
Yeah.
Um, because I don't know, I felt as if I was willing to bring Pokemon that had pretty decent play into that, but I guess it's
Mhm.
another thing on his team that was like mostly neutral, and he was certainly glad to encounter the Guzzlord in the front that game.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I agree. Well, either way, I think you and Steinar both had an incredible performance. For Steinar, this was really emotional. You could see, I'm sure you saw on the VOD, you probably saw on stage. As soon as the series was over and he hugged you, he started to tear up. He got very emotional. He's such a kind and gentle. He's like a bear, right? He's so kind and so gentle, but also such a big person. And I kind of said this in the cast. I said, look, he's in a region where you've got Harjeff, you've got Corlash, you've got Kanan, you have all these other insane Brazilian trainers in the grand finals of LAIC versus Marto, another Brazilian trainer in Vitorello. You have so much talent in that region, and I know that there have been periods of time where Steiner has felt like he's living in the shadows of other people. And that's not a good place to be mentally or emotionally. So for Steiner to be able to win the series, I think meant a lot to him. It's so tough, right? Because as much as everyone wanted you to win, I feel like if there was someone who deserved to win, it was probably Steinar. You know, just such a kind soul. And
Yeah. It's like
yeah,
another thing. Like, I've never not felt happy for the person that defeated me winning.
yeah,
But I also start to notice that the more I'm in that situation and I just lose again, the more it, you just you just struggle mentally with it.
yeah. I understand. And that's the thing as well. Like we talked about 4 grand finals in a row. And it's one of those things where I'm sure in the moment you don't really think about it that way. You're not like, oh, this is the 4th time I'm here. Your body language and your approach to the grand finals and the interview, I really enjoyed the interview. I thought that you seemed confident. You seemed like you were in a good position. Mentally, you were having fun with it. I thought that was really good. And I really admire your approach to all these grand finals. But yeah, man, you're a fucking competitor. You want to win. That's why you invest so much and you give so much of yourself to this. So, yeah, I obviously can't put myself directly in your shoes, but I can empathize, you know.
And the thing is, like, you can't ever take for granted that you make it this far. Like,
Yeah,
with
true.
every lost grand final, there's also the question of, will I ever get this far again?
Yeah.
And like, I can invest as much as I do invest and make it more likely, but I cannot guarantee it because, like, if you take a look at who else is competing at these, it's just so much talent out there, and it's not going to get easier going forward.
Yeah. That's also a trap in its own right. If you start looking too far ahead and you take your eye off the ball, that's a huge mental trap. So, you've really got your work cut out for you, my friend. I mean, with all the accolades and respect and adoration that you have earned in the community, there's still challenges, right? And not all of them are on the surface, and you definitely don't show them as deeply as you're feeling them. But it's such a tough moment because I'm trying my hardest not to be biased during our cast, and Steiner is just such a kind person who definitely deserves his own victories. I just wish that his victory didn't come at the expense of yours and vice versa. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that's very true.
You know what I mean?
Oh man.
I wish you both could have won. That would have been awesome. But yeah, ZZ. I don't think anyone questions your contribution. I don't think anyone questions your talent, just like nobody questions Steinar. We know that Steinar is basically Harjeff's greatest rival, and that's for a good reason. And you're rivals with folks like Pata Man, so you're right up there at the top.
Supposedly.
Hey, come on! If he's is paying you respect, he's not doing it if he didn't believe in it, right?
That
So
is true.
that was an emotional grand finals, a basically fueled by explosive plays, insane team reads, great comps. My goodness, this
It was a good
season,
show, if nothing else, and I'm always glad
yes,
to deliver that.
yes, exactly. It was a show for the ages, and Butters and I felt that too. I mean, Butters and I have been commentating since 2022. We did the first ever EUIC, and every time, I'm serious, like every time we went off camera, he and I were like, we turned to each other, we were fist bumping, we're like, oh dude, that was so good, like we're so excited, ah. And then after the grand finals, I didn't have any voice left, and Butters and I were talking, we're like, man, that might have been one of the best grand finals of all time. Like of all the tournaments we've done, all the dozens of competitions, international worlds, all of them, that might have been one of the best, if not the best. So what a show, and what a time to be alive, you know. Well, if the 2026 season is starting that way, I cannot wait to see where it goes. I think that you and I are in this for the long run, and I know you have an incredible support system around you, and I know that Steiner has an incredible support system as well. And I'm sure that that has enabled you both to keep going, even when you maybe felt like others were standing in the spotlight where you belonged. So I know that you'll find your way back there, my friend. I know it'll come. So that being said, this has been a massive, massive episode. We've talked about Frankfurt, we talked about Monterrey, we talked about Pittsburgh. We tried a couple of new things in this one as well. We talked about the bracket breakdowns, which ZZ coined the term of, and will be asking for royalty payments for me very shortly. And
This is
we
true.
talked about casters. We covered a lot of topics. I'm not sure if there's anything we missed.
Well, we did cover like a whole lot of stuff, so I feel as if we are at a point in the cast where we may just let our listeners go, let
Yeah.
them wait for. I think it's Milwaukee and Belo Horizonte in probably like
Mhm.
3 weeks ish. So still some
I'm
time until the next show.
Yeah, I'm checking here. Belo Horizonte is October 11th and 12th, and then we have Milwaukee the same weekend. Yeah, you're exactly right. Followed by Lille, October 25th, 26th. So usually I prep a lot of things like in terms of when you can earn championship points and what's coming up. I'm not sure if there's anything else that you wanted to call out, but I do think those tournaments coming up in October are really exciting. October is also the spooky month. It's probably my favorite month of the year, my favorite event season of the year for Pokemon Go because we get the Halloween event. So I'm looking forward to that
Yeah.
quite a bit.
Like while we were recording the podcast, Pokemon Go did drop like a preliminary schedule for the October events, like a content update, but there's still no details on what exactly the Halloween event is going to entail. So, yeah, we may speculate. People are still hoping for a Mimikyu release, but whether that is coming or not, every year there is that question. So far, the answer has been no, but we keep our hopes up.
I feel like that's the hope every single year. And the closest we've gotten was when Pokemon debated us by giving us the Pikachu in a Mimikyu costume.
Oh, true.
Like,
The fake one.
geez, this is like the cowboy. This is the collective cowboy hat Caterpie. Please give us Mimikyu. I beg you.
Oh
But
man.
yeah, there's an interesting event coming up as well with Diplin and Hydrapple coming to the harvest. I heard as well that this is like the hardest evolution sequence of any Pokemon in Pokemon Go history in terms of candies. So that's going to be a thrill. But that's neither here nor there. ZZ, you're right. This has been a longer episode. I think that we covered about everything we're going to cover, and I cannot wait to talk about Belo Horizonte and Milwaukee. Milwaukee's actually pretty nice. I saw the B-roll on the stream, and I was like, "Damn, I didn't know Milwaukee had it going on."
Yeah. Like I've heard people talk about how Milwaukee isn't actually all that bad, and honestly, I did feel the same way about Pittsburgh. Like I
Yeah,
don't really like my very first U.S. regional was Hartford of all places, and that is not a great city. But Pittsburgh was lovely. I don't mind Pittsburgh. I may come again next season.
yeah, it's the Steel City, right? They used to ship steel down those rivers back when Carnegie was at the top of his game, and after they cleaned up all that production pollution, it actually shows itself as a beautiful city with so many bridges and rivers and hills and mountains. I thought it was lovely. Yeah. But all right, my friend, that was an incredible recap. We covered three incredible competitions. I honestly think this is the best start to a season we've ever had. And 2026 feels very, very special. So there's a lot of exciting things in the pipelines, behind the scenes, and in front of our eyes. And when all those things come together, it's going to make this a year that is unforgettable. ZZ, it's been an honor. It's been a pleasure. I don't know how I would do this without you. And I appreciate all of your insights. You're one of a kind. And I can't wait for the next one.
Yeah, I'll be here no matter what. It's going to be a couple of weeks break, but then we'll pick up the pace with Milwaukee, Belo Horizonte. We'll have Lille, we have Gdansk. We'll have so much to do in October and early November. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Sounds good. I'll see you very soon, my friend. And thank you all for listening. This has been a long one, but a good one. And we will see you very, very soon.